A very warm welcome to all of you at today's seminar, Man, Woman and Child and the State, Lessons from the True Story Behind Mrs. Chatterjee versus Norway. Last night, a large group of us saw the movie Mrs. Chatterjee versus Norway, a very powerful film, a compelling account of the story of Sagarika Chakrabarti, a lone Indian mother battling a brutal and powerful state agency in a foreign land that had taken away her children. But the film is also much more than the story of Sagarika. It is perhaps more importantly, for what we are discussing today, a very telling account of the cruelty, the malice, and the sense of cultural superiority of this entire system of so-called child protection. The film casts a very knowing gaze over the sinisterness of the system, the way the children are squirreled away without warning, and the parents are completely shut out. The claustrophobia, the sense of the walls closing in around you, the ruthlessness with which your every natural reaction as a parent is turned into a reason to keep your child away from you. The drastic effects of on the child of these removals. They stop talking, they turn into zombies. There is a total collapse of their sense of themselves. And finally, the weird practices used to pacify children who resist being taken away from their parents. The passive-aggressive methods used to corner them into submitting and complying and dropping their resistance to being placed in state care. You must all see this film. It's playing this week all over India and in 150 countries around the world. I would now like to thank our chief guests, Mr. Shatrughan Sinha and Mr. Manoj Jha, for honoring us with their presence. In India, and for Bollywood fans around the world, Shatrughan Sinha needs no introduction. He is a veteran Bollywood megastar of gargantuan popularity. His hit dialogues have entered the lexicon of many Indian languages, but he is here today in his capacity as a member of parliament from West Bengal, Sagarika's state, from the Trinamool Congress. He has come here to hear us out along with our other chief guest, Mr. Manoj Jha. Mr. Manoj Jha is one of our most distinguished members of parliament. He is a terrific orator. He is also the national spokesperson of the Rashtriya Janata Dal. We hope to persuade Mr. Sinha and Mr. Jha to raise in parliament the issue of this seminar, of children being snatched from innocent parents by brutal Western child agencies. This is happening all the time in places where lakhs of our fellow countrymen and women are going to live and work every year, sending back much-needed earnings, raising the prestige of our nation, but left totally alone when their children are targeted. This is a worldwide humanitarian crisis. It's not only about Indians. It's a worldwide crisis being perpetrated by arrogant and inhumane state agencies. The intervention by India in the Norwegian case of Sagarika has been noted and appreciated by people abroad who have been working for years for the reform of these agencies. This is a global issue waiting to be led by India. I extend my warmest welcome and heartfelt thanks to our guests who have especially flown in from abroad for this program. Connie Rejuli from the USA, Marius Rikeras from Norway, and Ova Knarvik, also from Norway. I will tell you more about them and their tremendous work in the field later in the program. For now, another big round of applause for them all. I now turn to the most important person present here, the real-life heroine on which the film is based, Sagarika Chakravarti. Have a seat. Sagarika, 10 years ago, you were vilified before the whole world by Norwegian Child Services. They told blatant lies about you. They took away your children, whom you had born in your womb. That was a grave sin. A sin not just against you and your children, but a sin against motherhood. In your defeat, in your anguish, and in the danger that Barnaverna posed to you, all mothers were defeated and confronting a grave, grave danger. But you held your ground. You fought back. You got back your children. You picked up the pieces of your life that were shattered by Barnaverna. You set your children back on the path to security and happiness, the path that Barnaverna had knocked them off of. And once everything was in order, you stubbornly, determinedly, and single-handedly fought to reclaim your name and tell the world of the injustice of Norway's Barnaverna. You wrote a book, and you managed to have it made into a movie. A movie with Rani Mukherjee, one of Bollywood's biggest stars. 10 years later, you stand vindicated and victorious. Just as all mothers fell with your defeat, we all rise in your victory. Hats off to you. Finally, a very warm welcome to my dear friends and colleagues from around the world who are joining us via Zoom over there and on the live stream for this seminar. We have a massive online international gathering for today's program. Our speakers represent 3 continents, Europe, North America, and South America. Thank you for joining. Long live our fight for justice against so-called child protection services. They do not protect children. They destroy children. They are completely uncaring and ignorant of the needs of children. They are a vicious, dysfunctional, power-mad, and uncontrolled beast of a state bureaucracy that was ill-conceived from the start and is causing unspeakable and totally unnecessary misery to millions of children, mothers, fathers, grandparents, aunts, and uncles around the world. It is time to say, this version of child protection has failed. We need to completely uproot it and come up with a completely different way of intervening for children. We have much to talk about on this very heavy subject, but I thought that we should start on a happy note. We will first have a small Kathak performance. Kathak is a classical dance from North India. The artist is Mala Sharma, distinguished Kathak dancer and guru of the Lucknow Gharana. The musical accompaniment has been arranged by Ustad Arif Ali Khan. He will also play on the sarangi. Please aaiye. The vocalists are Manak Malhotra and Arshul Amin of the Kairana Gharana. And on the tabla, we have Shri Anand Bhatt. Malaji will dance to the song Thumaka Chalata Ramachandra. This song was written by the famous Bhakti poet Saint Tulsidas. In it, He imagines Lord Ram as a toddler playing with his mothers and nurses. The refrain, Thumaka Chalata Ramachandra, refers to the characteristically stumbling gait of a toddler who is just learning to walk. The poet sings of the tinkling of the baby's anklets, Bajata Penjaniya, as he stumbles towards his mother. She gathers him up in her embrace. Achala Ranja Angajhari, Vividha Bhati Sodolari, and pets him in 1,000 ways. Tana Manadhana Vari Vari, Kahata Mridu Bachaniya, saying, "My sweet child," over and over, like an ascetic, lost body and soul in the adoration of God. Thank you. I now invite Malaji to commence the performance. Malaji. Thank you for that mellifluous dance. I wonder if you noticed towards the end when the dancer makes this gesture. I had specially instructed Khan Sahib to include that in the choreography. If we were in Norway today, by now it would have been stormed by policemen and Barnawarner caseworkers, and the music would have been stopped. So, I now invite my parents, Suneet and Mani Shankar Iyer, to please escort our chief guests, Mr. Shatrughan Sinha and Mr. Manoj Jha, and our heroine of the evening, Sagarika, on stage. I invite my mother, Suneet Mani Iyer, to please honor our dancer, Malaji. Please, Malaji, please, tashrif laiye. I now invite Mr. Mani Shankar Iyer, my father, to please honor Ustad Arif Ali Khan Sahib, who has arranged the music for this evening. Please could we honor Manak Malhotra, our vocalist. Beautiful, Manik. So wonderful. And I now invite Shri Aditya Bhattji, who was superb on the tabla. The tabla is the heart and soul of a performance like this. Usually musicians and dancers don't oblige for just a small 5-minute piece, but they all felt that they wanted to participate in this program and show their solidarity for the cause. And last but not least, the budding classical artist, Arshul Amin of the Kairana Gharana, Deputy Music Director. Thank you. I would now like to invite Sagarika to please honor our chief guest, Shri Shatrughan Sinha ji. And also our other chief guest, Shri Manoj Jha. Okay, Sagarika, please stay where you are. Can we have, this is something I also want to do for Sagarika. सागरिका, पहले आप मुझे बताएं कैसे लग रहा है?
I'm so excited, actually.
It was a long, long journey before you got here.
Yes.
And tell me something. We noticed yesterday after the film was released and it got such fantastic reviews. You even had people flying in from miles away around the globe to support you. The Norwegian ambassador wrote an article in India's leading English language daily, where he made all kinds of statements supporting what Barnawarner had done to your family. How did you feel seeing the same response from Norway 10 years after you've proven yourself, you've shown yourself to be a good mother and shown the world how happy your children are with you? Aapko kaise laga?
Actually, Rani Mukherjee is playing my character very beautifully. And I'm so excited. And when I'm just already have watched the film, I'm feeling so much, it is very much heart-wrenching. and as well as I am feeling I have lots of emotional bonding with my children. So all my past, all the memories are reviving in my mind. So
So how did you feel when you had all these memories coming back? आपको ये सारी यादें आ रही थी और फिर पेपर
yes,
में फिर से जैसे 10 साल पहले आपको जलील किया गया था पेपर्स में नॉर्वेजियन अथॉरिटीज ने,
yes.
फिर से वही बात आ रही थी नॉर्वे के एम्बेसडर से, आपको कैसे लगा? आपको लगा कि ये एक फेमिनिस्ट कंट्री ऐसे कर सकती है?
Actually, still the unlawful practices of the child welfare still prevails, and they abducted the children from their families and always allege the parents and always they will uh, always allege the parents that and gave the fake allegation against of the parents.
तो मतलब वो कभी भी नहीं मानेंगे कि तुम एक अच्छी माँ हो और तुम्हारे बच्चे तुम्हारे साथ खुश है?
एक बात
बोलो।
मैं बोलूं, चोर कभी बोलते हैं कि मैं चोरी की चोरी किया है?
She asked, does a thief ever say that I have stolen something? Sagarika,
Stealer is always the stealers. So there is no other option.
सागरिका, मुझे बताएं, आपने इतना संघर्ष किया, आपने अपने बुरे वक्त को बहुत पीछे छोड़ दिया है, लेकिन आज भी उस कांड का असर क्या आपकी जिंदगी में है, आपके बच्चों की जिंदगी में है?
Yes, my son is suffering in terrible trauma. Still, he is suffering in ADHD, and actually, it's very difficult to cover up from all the traumas already.
Do you feel like the affectionate, joyous, happy boy who used to play around you in the park, in the same park that was actually shown in the movie? This is
Yes.
because mothers nowadays are constantly taking videos and photos of their children. So she unconsciously documented her time with her son. क्या आपको लगा कि वही बेटा आपको वापस मिला, कि बानवान के बेस्ट इंटरेस्ट केयर में उसको एकदम बदल गया और जो आपके पास आया वो आपका पहला बेटा नहीं था?
यस, मेरा पहला बेटा वो नहीं था, क्योंकि जैसे उनके ऊपर जितना अब्यूज हुआ है, the foster parents and as well as my in-laws family was physically abused my children. So still he's suffering in trauma.
So the long shadow of the actions that were taken 10 years ago continue to live. Well, let's move on to a more cheerful. I have no doubt that Sagarika will surmount even these problems. She has infinite Shakti. Can we have Ashima on the Zoom, please? Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the second heroine of the evening, Ashima Chibber. Can we have her on there? There she is. Hi, Ashima. Ashima Chibber, the director of Mrs. Chatterjee versus Norway. She is the one responsible for this movie. It was her eye that caught Sagarika's story, and it was she who approached Rani Mukherjee to do this film. Ashima, congratulations. What a powerful film. I watched it last night in a large group. Some of them are still here. And I was amazed to see the reaction of the people in the theater. People were profoundly impressed with the way you had rendered Sagarika's story. What do you have to say about that?
Well, the story itself is the incident, and the happening itself was so shocking. It's so shocking for for when I heard it the first time, and I'm sure, and that was the kind of impact that I also wanted to create while making the film. That because when you hear something that has happened in real life, you don't hear exactly how it unfolded, but you make a version of it in your head as you're listening and the way it impacts you. So that impact I found so intense on me, which was my endeavor after I spoke to Sagarika, to make the film that would be equally hard-hitting, because the incident itself is so hard-hitting. So I wanted to be true to what had happened and it impact the viewer that way.
Well, people were weeping and clapping and cheering at different points in the whole rendition. And you certainly managed to convey a very compelling dramatization of what occurred, which remained true to the spirit of Sagarika's story. That was what I was concerned about, having been so close to this case, all those years ago. And I congratulate you for the sensitivity and respect with which you have treated, a living human being story, especially one who has been so attacked and vilified in a time when she wasn't able to speak for herself. But I also want to tell you that we were at the cinema hall with our friends from Norway and the USA who had flown in particularly to show their solidarity for your film, even though it was showing in their own countries. And what was interesting, we were all sitting next to each other. And what was interesting is that as you were showing this story, they kept mentioning how this is also recognizable for them and how they have seen this kind of thing happen over and over again. And my colleagues and I also noticed references which you had interwoven into Devika Chatterjee's story from other stories, other families than Sagarika's who tried to flee Norway, who tried to find out about it. So how were you able to get such a good understanding of the system?
Well, the understanding of the system, of course, came after I had already followed Sagarika's story in the news when it first came out, and I found it pretty, uh, confusing and also shocking, of course, that how can someone come into your house and take your children and just appropriate them, that okay, this belongs to us or this belongs to the state and you're no good. And being Indian and with all our mythology and our kind of upbringing, we have a way of looking at life, as the way a mother looks at a child or the way we look at mothers. And so it started from there. And then I started to research, as you peel the onion, you slowly realize that there is much, much more here than what meets the eye. And also, I'm not a lawyer, but it was very difficult for me to study so much law and read up on child rights and human rights. And I contacted through Sagarika a lot of human rights activists in Norway and people on Facebook and everything. So I did thorough research to know what.
So you actually had people from Norway contacting you and telling you about their system.
Or the other way around, because the people who were targets, especially, so I had, it was late at night that I used to, because of the time difference at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock at night, I used to be awake waiting for phone calls from people. I'm saying this because it took the effort to get, I wanted to get to the core of the problem, because the thing is that my first duty I felt as a maker was to protect the children, because, we all make things and we move on. But I did not want to be counter to the concept of what I was planning to do. If we were trying to protect the children, then I wanted to be very sure that through the film, the children should not feel later on in their lives as they grow older and, that the film was unfair or, so I wanted to be careful about that. So I wanted to be sure what I'm doing and be very informed of everything and the dialogue and debate that's going on in Norway right now. And also to have my own point of view, because as a filmmaker, your opinion is why you make a film and why you express it. Yeah, so there was intense research that I did.
Very interesting, because it showed, in particular, in those two social workers. I mean, you had brilliant character actors in the whole film, but our favorite, and this includes for Connie and Marius, was those two social workers. They were so true to life. I mean, that was proof to me that you had really gone deep into this. I have actually I've seen hearings in the courts of the United Kingdom where the social workers are passing those same evil looks at each other and at the judge. And, I mean, they just don't care that there's actually a parent, and a child that's at stake over here. That was just brilliantly done. So great congratulations to all your actors, but especially to those two Estonian actresses. We love them.
I mean, you know, they were with us when I narrated the story to them. They were just so moved. They started to cry when I was narrating, and because one of them had, I think her baby was 6 months, and the other one was pregnant while we were shooting. She was on her fourth child, so. And so I found it just amazing that these girls just were desperate to play these parts because they felt so strongly about the issue that we were dealing with. So
Yes.
they
Indeed, it grabs you by
became
the throat.
very motivated.
Fantastic. And
Yeah.
I have one last question. We saw yesterday that the Norwegian ambassador had actually admonished you for the film. And he then rushed to the papers to make all kinds of complaints about Norwegian attitudes to hand feeding and co-sleeping, which he says are very well accepted. But do you not feel that, I mean, he's ignoring the fact that your film is actually making a much larger comment on the ruthlessness and the arrogance of this system of child welfare?
Well, I mean, I don't know what I can say because it's it's a very complicated thing for me to say. Of course, he's a educated, learned man. He's the ambassador, and he knows what he's saying. But ours is a creative expression of something we believe in. So I feel the dialogue should have been more at hand rather than a statement.
Yes, I have actually been waiting myself for a response from the Norwegian embassy. I have often gone outside alone and stood there and asked to speak to them, because I do believe that dialogue is the only way forward. And there is really no reason for this to be taken as a criticism of Norway. You can always have state agencies that function badly. And I mean, we in India know so much about that. So, well, I mean, all I can say is well done.
Thank you. And I also feel that in the film that, the Norway's point of view is well balanced by Daniel's character. And, I think we all parents believe in, child protection. If they are coming from any danger of violence or anything, of course, the children need to be protected. And so the law is not wrong. But the thing is, when so much money is involved, it's a human condition for people to be or to become whatever they become.
Yes, they do say that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Well, congratulations. Congratulations to both of you. You killed it. It's amazing. Well done.
Thank you.
Sagarika, you can take it. Thank you so much. Can you just show Sagarika? And can you switch this off because it's going to interfere with the mic? Thank you. So we will now begin our discussion. The seminar has 3 themes. First, the story of Sagarika. Second, the experience more generally with these child services systems in Norway and other countries. And third, academic reflections on the factors that have led us to this current version of child protection. You will hear speakers from a range of countries, perspectives, and professions. You will hear from victims, activists, lawyers, doctors, mental health specialists, women's rights experts, child rights experts, and academics. Our speakers will tell you a number of things about this issue of children being taken by the state. But above all, what this seminar wants to convey to you is the depth of the human tragedy that we are looking at. You can have some really good ideas, but if in their application, they cause innocent people to suffer, then we must rethink these theories. Late one night last month, a young couple, Dhara and Bhavesh, left these messages on my phone, which with their permission, I'm going to play for you. They had by this time been separated from their baby in Germany for 1.5 years. This was their first child. She was taken away from them at 7 months of age. Dhara and Bhavesh are among the scores of couples that have contacted me from all over the world over the last 10 years since Sagarika's case. At the time they left these messages on my phone, I had already been working on their case for a year. Theirs is the toughest case that I have ever taken. And the nature of the suspicion on them is so alarming that I nearly refused their case. You will hear about it from them later. They took their 7-month-old baby daughter for treatment to a hospital after noticing bleeding in her diaper. And the hospital turned around and accused them of having deliberately caused a genital injury to her. You can imagine the seriousness of the situation. And I thought, why should I take up such a controversial case when I'm already fighting a losing battle, persuading Norwegians that hand feeding is not child abuse? This is all voluntary work. I don't charge a penny for it. This is not my career. I didn't need to take the case. But my conscience did not permit me to turn this couple away. I had already seen cases from the USA where parents were wrongly accused of causing injuries to their children when they themselves took the injured child to the hospital. I had seen hospitals get it wrong. I had seen child services exaggerate medical claims, and I had seen judges simply too cowardly to make a decision against what the child services were saying. I knew the system was unfair. So I looked at Dhara and Bhavesh's case, and by the time I woke up to find these messages from them on my phone, I had long been convinced of their case and was working very hard on it. So they were not sending me these to convince me of anything. They were sending me these messages in the same way that parents keep sending me these heart-rending messages from all over the world because no one will listen to them. Shivam, these are the messages I found one morning sent separately by Bhavesh and Dhara to me at 2 a.m. from Germany. I'm playing these messages with their permission, and first I will play the one that I heard first, which is from the father, number 1, audio 1.
Dhara? Dhara? काय नाही त्याचे धरा ती કેટલું લડ્યું છે ધારા એક માને પુકારશે ને ભગવાન ક્યારે નહીં છોડશે ધારા એક માની પુકાર ક્યારે પણ ભગવાન નહીં છોડશે ચિંતા નહીં કર ધારા પણ ધારા તું કમ चुप था अरे हाँ काई नहीं एक मिनट शांता 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 शांता
For those who could not follow, the mother is crying. The father is comforting her, saying that God will not be deaf to a mother's prayers. Their baby will be back. The father is also crying. Immediately below this message, there was an audio note to me from the father, which he had sent me after he had persuaded his wife to speak to a friend on the phone. Please play audio 2.
दारा को नहीं देख सकता बहुत रो रही थी मैं नहीं देख पा रहा दारा बहुत रो रही मैं कुछ नहीं कर पा रहा हूँ मेलों की मेल का रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी होता है कि पूरे घर को संभाल लेकिन मैं किसी को नहीं संभाल बहुत मेरे को मैम ये कोड हियरिंग में चुप नहीं बैठना है मेरे को बहुत सारी चीजें बोलनी कैसे बोलूं नहीं पता मेरे को दाना मना कर मत बोलो, लेकिन मेरे को बहुत सारी चीजें बोलनी है कोर्ट में। 1 साल से हैरान कर दिया हमको इधर रहना नहीं था, फिर भी जबरदस्ती रहना पड़ रहा है। किसको बोलूं, क्या बोलूं, नहीं समझ।
He is saying, the father, that he cannot bear to see his wife suffering, that he feels so helpless that as a male, he is not able to live up to his duty of taking care of his family. He says then that he's determined to talk his heart out to court. And then he says, more to himself than to me, how should I tell the court? What shall I say? I do not understand what to do. Then I noticed that about 20 minutes before the father had sent me these messages, the mother had sent me this one. Please, audio 3.
मैं बिल्कुल हैंडल नहीं हो रहा है, मैं पागल हो जाऊंगी, पर 1 मिनट के लिए भी माइंड अगर फ्री हो ना तो वो प्रेशर नहीं हैंडल होता। भगवान का नाम भी नहीं लेती क्योंकि वो भी मुझे आर्या की याद दिलाता है, अपना दुख याद दिलाता है। जैसे पूरा कंट्रोल करके रखती हूँ, बिजी रखती हूँ, पर 1 सेकंड जब टीवी में से किसी से बाहर आती हूँ, नहीं हैंडल हो रहा है, मेरे को नहीं हैंडल हो रहा। क्या करूं, किससे बोल, मुझे क्या फील हो रहा है, मतलब मुझे भी नहीं पता मैं किसी को क्या बोलूं कि मुझे क्या होता है।
That's the mother. She is saying that she cannot bear it anymore, that she cannot even pray to God, as that reminds her of her baby and her grief. She says that she tries hard to control her feelings all day, but as soon as she turns off the television or takes a break from doing anything, the feelings come flooding back. So that's it. This is what it is like to do the work that I do. This is what I have to hear and see day in and day out for 11 years, and it's the same in every case. The reason I shared this audio with you is that I too feel desperate and hopeless. In these 11 years of struggle, I keep thinking about Mahatma Gandhi and what he taught us about fighting for the truth. And one of the things he always said, that the aim of satyagraha, of political struggle, is to persuade your adversary of the truth and of the justice of your claims. He said that if you truthfully appeal to the humanity of the other side, if you can just make them understand your pain, then they will come over to you. So this was my intention in playing these audios to you. And with this prelude, I will now start calling upon the speakers for the evening. The first is Marius Rijkeras from Norway. He has flown all the way here to express his solidarity for the film. Norway's Child Services is not only going after immigrants, it is as ruthless and unfair when it decides to remove children from native Norwegian families. Marius Rijkeras is a vocal and persistent human rights advocate from Norway. He gives a lot of his time to helping families with taken children. And in the last few years, he has been conducting an extraordinary and almost solo campaign, raising awareness about Norway's Barnevernet from New Zealand to the Bahamas to Turkey and now in India. Marius, I invite you to come up and address the gathering.
Thank you, first of all, for having me here in India. I'm so happy to be here. You have no idea how happy I am, because I think really that I'm always optimistic. You have to be optimistic when you're working in this field, but I think this will be a tremendous game changer. I've been looking forward to this movie for so long, and I'm not here on behalf of myself. I'm here on behalf of thousands of people in Norway who are fighting the same battle as Chatterjee is. And you don't know how much this movie means to all of the people in Norway who are suffering from injustice. And you know, I've been a human rights advocate for more than 20 years. And when I studied law more than 20 years ago, all of my fellow students said that, why do you waste your time studying human rights law? We have the best system in the world. It's wasteless. Study something else. But I always wanted to go my own ways, and I never thought of Norway as the perfect country, but it likes to portray itself as a good country. And in many ways, it is a good country, but it's a small country. And of course, I didn't have any intention to work with child welfare cases in the first beginning. But 13 years ago, some families approached me and said, can you please look into our cases and see if they are in compliance with human rights acts? Easy as that. I said, I will do that. And all of a sudden, I realized that neither the government of Norway don't pay any respect to the human rights acts at all. Because in Norway, we have this very strange system. You know, it's a very small country, far out north. Nobody really cares about this small country. And they can do pretty much what they want. And you know what upsets me the most about the Norwegian authorities or the Norwegian elite is that they have so much money, you know, the government or the elite, that they think that they can do whatever they want. They're like this spoiled kid who's in the classroom, and they think that they can do whatever they want to whoever they want. So, and Sagarita and Surania are already very popular in Norway. They are human rights heroes in Norway. So I think we should give them an applause for their efforts in Norway. So of course it was natural for me to come here and show my support. I've known Surania for many years. I'm so impressed with her, you know, her compassion about human rights. We should have thousands of her in Norway, and would have been much better. But the thing about Norwegian lawyers is that they are afraid to combat the system because they depend upon the system. And this movie, which I saw yesterday, and I have not, personally, I have two children. They are now grown up, so they're 18 and 20. I've never had any issues with barnevernet myself, even though I'm not a very popular lawyer in Norway. So you should think they could attack me as well. But I've seen so many families, immigrant families as well as Norwegian families, who were suffering the same battle as Chatterjee was doing, and for so many years. And there is no way you can restore the sufferings they have been through. And when I saw the movie yesterday, I was like, you know, I got goosebumps and I got emotional because I know how many families around in my country, Norway, who will feel some kind of like comfort and some kind of support by watching this movie. So, you know, this is maybe the greatest event, the bilateral agreement between Norway and India ever. So, and when I read this ambassador, I'm not particular a fan of Norwegian ambassadors because they always try to hide the truth and tell how good Norway is. And when I read the headline, Norway cares. No, Norway doesn't care. They care about money, and they are targeting. And one friend of mine said, I saw the movie yesterday because you advised me to go. So they had the movie in Norway too yesterday. He said, is it really that bad? And I said, I've been telling you this for 20 years. So this has been going on for so long. Norway started, you know, with immigrant families back in the 50s and 60s when they had these gypsies coming to Norway. And more than 1,500 children were removed from these gypsies families traveling around in Norway because they wanted to assimilate them into the Norwegian culture. So this has been going on for so long. And what's happening now is that Norway is a very, very, you know, a small country with 5.5 million people, but has the largest CPS budget in the world if you measure compared to the per capita. And a French lawyer, I met a French lawyer some years ago in an international human rights conference in Paris, And he's told me that, you know, Marius, that in France there are 60 million people. In your country there are 5. So there are 12 times as many people in France than in Norway. But you have 3 times higher CPS budgets than we do. And that kind of reflects what's going on in Norway compared to other European countries, that this is big business. And my friend yesterday said this, is it really true that are they really stealing children? And of course, yeah, they are. That's the truth. So, and every aspect of this movie yesterday, I will give that movie 10 out of 10. Not only because I'm involved in this, because the way I was so impressed by the characters, of course, these social workers. Let's start with the social workers. I love them because that's how they're trained. You know, social workers in Norway are trained to make, when they're doing the visitation rights before they take the children into public care, they're trained to make the families uncomfortable. It's actually stated by the guru of Norwegian child welfare. Her name is Kari Killen. She's 88 years old now. But her lesson books for social workers says that, in her books, it says that it's important to make the parents as uncomfortable as possible to see how they react when they're stressed. So can you imagine? So that's the idea. And that's how we saw yesterday as well in your movie, that they're there for months in order for you to feel, or in order for the families to feel uncertain. And I think every parent would feel uncertain if someone came home and you know that if you don't behave well, they will take your children. That's the truth. So that's how it starts. And then you start, so that, you know, those scenes with these social workers coming into Stavanger and doing this like investment stuff was so accurate. And then you have the so-called county boards, which are not even tribunals. These are boards made by the government, and they're controlled by the government. And the statistics says that more than 90% of all the cases in the county boards are won by the government. So how can children or how can families have a chance? And then this follows up all the way in the legal judiciary system in Norway, which we have a very, very biased legal system that always supported the government, not only in CPS cases, but in general. So everything about this movie told something I can familiarize with. Even the scenes from Estonia, because this movie was mainly made in Estonia. And I recognize one of these buildings, and 6-7 years ago, I had a seminar in that building. So it was kind of funny about the Norwegian child welfare system. And of course, the Norwegian government didn't like that I was there to tell about the Norwegian government, how they were actually violating human rights. So, and they gave a lot of money to all these European countries, Estonia included. They give like almost $1 billion per year to Estonia to make Estonia implement the same CPS system as we have. So the day after I made this interview, I was on the front page of Estonian newspapers who are very pro-Norwegian because they depend upon the Norwegian money, and said that I was a spy for Russia. So that's kind of like says, you know, this comes like Surana says with a battle. But anyway, Norway has lost 15 cases in the European Court of Human Rights since September 2018. That proves that what we are telling here today is truth. The lawyers of the highest court in Europe are saying exactly the same thing as we are. Unfortunately, the Norwegian government doesn't care a calorie about these judgments because they think, like I said, that they have so much money, they have so much power that they can do whatever they want. And that's why I think this movie will be a game changer, because finally the truth will come out. I think you should be, if I could nominate you for the Nobel Peace Prize this year, I would be happy to do so. And that's why I would finally, as my last statement, really say thank you very much, not only for your wonderful hospitality and your wonderful food and everything, but that you're really making so much more support than you can ever imagine. So on behalf of the thousands of people who I'm representing here today, I would like to thank you so much. And I'm sure that this will be the most important meeting between Norway and India ever.
I'm going to be very strict with all my speakers because we started way too late. So our next speaker is Nandita Rao. Nandita Rao is a lawyer based in New Delhi. She's one of our most distinguished advocates in the field of human rights and welfare legislation. She played a very important role in Sagarika's case when Sagarika came back to India and her children were sent back to India, but not to her. They were given in care of their paternal uncle. He was a bachelor in his 30s. He had his own life to live. And, it became very clear that, no one in India would have any doubt how ridiculous this grand Norwegian solution was. But it became very clear in the diplomatic negotiation between India and Norway on this case that Norway needed a face saver. And so the Indian side gave in. But Sagarika's husband chose to stay on in Norway and her in-laws refused access to the babies. And so now Sagarika had a job on her hands persuading the Indian authorities to return the children to her. And this is where we turn to Nandita. As an expert in the Indian child welfare system, she gave crucial legal advice to Sagarika and was absolutely essential in her eventual victory. And since then, Nandita has worked with me on many such cases from around the world. She has appeared online in the courts of the United Kingdom for families there with taken children. And she does all this work for free. She refuses to take any payment. Put it together, ladies and gentlemen, for Nandita Rao.
Thank you so much, Suranya. But I think Suranya is more the lawyer than me. She just eggs me on and then I find the sections, but the ideas are all hers. So before I start, Sagarika, Shatrughan Sinha ji, Mr. Mani Shankar Iyer, Suranya, and all the mothers. After having worked on so many of these cases with Suranya, it's still so heart-wrenching to hear these cries. And in court, we are blamed for showing our emotion. So to start with, the courtroom is not a place where children's issues should be decided. Because if we have left our emotions outside as judges and as lawyers and as people, then we can't possibly be looking at the child or speaking at the child or understanding what is in the best interest of the child, because you have to have empathy and emotions to understand what is in the best interest of the child. So one of the biggest criticisms of me by judges is that she's a lawyer who starts crying. But I don't think you can do human rights litigation without doing that. So we have limited time and we have a lot of speakers. So I'll quickly come. The topic that Suranya has chosen is an extremely good topic: man, woman, and law. So first, the law that applied to man, woman, and child was the family law. In India, it's personal law. But even in the Western world, it was their personal law was also very conservative. So when it came to child custody, the battle was between the man and the woman. Traditional law gave man all the powers over the child, even though the woman was the birther and the woman was the nurturer. So 30 years, mothers fought men to get a right to their child. Otherwise, it was he's the natural guardian, he has the money, servants can look after the child. So the moment a man was not interested in his wife, the children were taken and given. So mothers fought and fought and fought. And today the law has been changed that a mother is also a natural guardian and the wishes of the child and the best interest of the child is seen. And man and woman have been sort of equalized in personal law when it comes to custody of the children. And just as mothers of our parents' generations had won this battle within the family, in the year 2000 in India, but I think sometime in the 70s in the West, the state suddenly entered into the fight with the family. So the battle for children from being between mothers and fathers, where fathers had the upper hand, the battle for children became between the state and the family. because the child welfare department started knocking into everybody's houses and seeing, oh, are you parenting well? Many of them may not even have had children of their own. So they don't even know what they are checking for, what they are looking for. And the whole thing is totally subjective, that whether you are the good parent or you are the bad parent, and the state got the right to take away the child from both the parents and make a child with parents an orphan, snatching away not only the child from his family, but from all his relatives, uncles, grandparents, cousins, friends, family friends, inheritance, language, culture. So in India, in the year 2000, this interference of the state came through Juvenile Justice Act 2000, where for the first time till now, Juvenile Justice Act was only for children who were in conflict with the law, who were caught in some offense, who committed some offense. But now in the year 2000, for the first time, this special language came in, children in need of care and protection, which meant till now the state could not come and take your child, because the personal law was only between family members. And under Guardians and Ward Act, suppose somebody was being really bad to their children, a neighbor or a grandmother or a grandfather or a relative could go to the guardian's court and say, look, this child is being treated so badly, please. And in the Guardians and Wards Act, they had to make all the family members a party. So Guardians and Ward Act did protect children whose parents were torturing them, but it was protected through kith and kin, through neighbor, through friend, not through the State Department. But Juvenile Justice Act, through child rights activists, brought in the state that children in need of care and protection included people whose parents were unfit to look after the children and keep them safe. And unfit is a very broad word. Unfit can be anything. You can do anything and be declared unfit. Like many times if we start crying in a rape case, we are told we are unfit to be lawyers. So unfit is very subjective. You know, if you care, you are unfit. So, but fortunately, I will applaud our Indian humanity of our culture, that who is the person to declare unfit? It is a child welfare committee. So it is not the judiciary, it is not the family court, it is people appointed by the government who are social workers, who are gynecologists, who are people related with children. But to the best of my knowledge, the first case in which foster care, child welfare committee took an order of foster care was Sagarika's case, where our child welfare committee took the children back from the uncle and gave it to the mother. So I think we should be very proud of our Indian child welfare committees, that they still care about the child. They still care about the mother. They still care to see in the facts of the case. And I was also very happy to note when COVID came last year in 2022. So that time, suddenly people petitioned the High Court that, oh, Juvenile Justice Care Act from 2000 has foster care system. And for 20 years, government has not recruited any foster carers. That is also an example that our child welfare committees were not focusing on snatching the children and giving them in foster care, because we did not need a list of foster carers. So the child welfare committees were doing what Suranya has coined a beautiful word, kinship care, and using the provision of sponsorship, that if a family has a problem, first try to understand, are they pathological people who are dangerous to the children? Or is it because the man, the father, has lost his job? Is it because the mother who was looking after the children has got some disease? Is it because the grandmother who was supporting while both the parents were going out to work has died? And if it is some circumstance in the family that is causing the lack of care that the child is getting, give the family money instead of taking the child out of the family and putting it into some other family and paying that family money. In foster care is not for free. The foster carer is not going out of his own love and saying, okay, I will look after this child. Foster care is a paid service. So in our law in India, we have sponsorship. So our child welfare committees have been focusing on supporting the family in their time of crisis to be able to be better parents. So I would urge our parliamentarians and our government that please take Sagarika's example. Don't let our child welfare committees turn into evil Barnavans, and please promote this thinking that support kinship care, support the family, give them whatever money, health care, whatever they need to become better parents. And with my salute to Sagarika and to all the mothers, including my own, thank you for leading this battle.
You've heard now from Norway and from India. I'm now going to shift the discussion to the United States of America. Our next speaker will be the redoubtable Connie Reguli, lawyer, grandmother, and avid advocate for reform of child protective services in the US. She runs a forum called the Family Forward Project that has chapters in many states of the USA. She fights fiercely for her clients and is not scared to get on the wrong side of judges for that, a rare quality in a lawyer. Please put your hands together for Connie. At her age, she has undertaken the long 30-hour journey here from Tennessee to New Delhi as an international ambassador for CPS reform.
Well, good evening, and thank you all very much for caring enough to be here. And I'm going to tell you, I've been at this 3 decades. I'm not going to be able to tell you everything in 8 minutes. I do have these great little cards, and I think I have one for almost everybody. And there is a little QR code. It will take you to a website. It has my name on the back. I have over 100 videos on YouTube. You can watch what I do, including watching me film in live time the stealing of a 4-week-old baby. And it's heart-wrenching, and it will give you that taste of reality. And I will say, much as our last speaker, I love my mother. I love my mother. And you know what? My mother wasn't perfect. And I know that in the world that we live in today, I would have been ripped from my mother. I had lost a father. She had a stepfather. I had a stepfather that was an alcoholic. He was violent. I lived in a small town. It was simple. My mother was a divorcee in the 60s. That was a scarlet letter in and of itself. And I know I would have been ripped from her. She ended up being a very successful businesswoman, very, very strong. And I am my mother. And that's why I stand here today. I became a lawyer just to do some good. I was smart. It was a second career for me. I wanted to step out. I just wanted to do something good. I thought I can do this. I can advocate. I can encourage people. And I started working with families. And over 3 decades, I worked with families against the government. And I saw a government in the United States of America that became increasingly more and more and more aggressive. And they were attacking vulnerable families much like my mother. They were families who were young parents. Maybe they were struggling with addiction. Maybe there was poverty. Maybe they had lost somebody. Maybe they had lost their financial supporter of their family, and the children would be taken from them. And I became more and more concerned about it, and I started studying it. And I started studying the finances in America. And there is a perverted financial incentive to remove children from their home. And the federal government sends money to the states. That is an incredible entitlement. And it's a dollar for dollar match. It's a use it or lose it scheme. It's it's never subject to sequester. And if there's an appropriations problem in the United States, and it's an entitlement. And then in 1997, they passed the Adoption and Safe Families Act. And you know why? Because they lost children in the foster care system and they had no idea where they were. And so they started a new system, and they said, now we're going to get those kids out of foster care. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to give the states extra money And we're going to give them extra money to give them new families. They totally social engineered the family in the United States of America for over 300,000 children a year. This is over millions and millions and millions of children. And then they gave the states a bonus check for every child they adopted into the home of a stranger. They get a $10,000 check. In my state of Tennessee, which is probably one of the average states in the United States, average population, maybe average income, they got $1.5 million just in the bonus checks that they put the price tag on the heads of children. It is a system that cannot be sustained. It is a humanitarian crisis. And I don't know what we do except to have a whole nation, perhaps your nation, to call out and to shame the Western world and to say no more. We have, through the history of mankind, we have had many humanitarian crises. We have done, I'm sort of a historian of different things that we have done. United States has this history of where we stole children off the Indian reservations and we put them in boarding schools, where we involuntary sterilization of people who were considered retarded. Right? We have had children that they picked up off the streets of New York and put them on orphan trains and sent them out west and stood them on train stations and let farmers come and pick the children to work for them. And we have this history, but somehow, some way, those chains get broken. And when those chains get broken, it comes from the voice of the people. It does not come from the politicians. And so I have, in the United States, I have put together about 5 years ago, and the way I met Saranya is I started reaching out to people through social media. And social media became an incredible platform to be able to collect families who are suffering from the same crisis. Because the stories that you've heard from Marius and from our other speaker these patterns are exactly the same. But there's one more they didn't talk about, and that is the silencing of the victims. Because they tell them they're confidential. It's against the best interest of your child to put your child's name out there on social media, and they get retaliated against if they go and they start talking, even if they go to a legislator, or if they try to file a complaint at central office, or if they file a complaint on the judge, they are retaliated against. And so I know what my spiritual gifts are. They are encouragement and advocacy. And so that is my goal, is to use that to families, to reach out to families, to turn more mothers, instead of the mothers that have become suicide victims for losing their children, which I have had. I have had mothers overdose because they see no hope. To turn more mothers into this kind of mother that we have with us today. And that is the one who does not stop, who continues to fight, who seeks other help and is willing to listen to them and to continue to take that next step every day. And one of the powerful things in the film to me, and I'm so grateful, I don't know if the filmmaker is still able to listen by Zoom, but there were many things about the way she produced the film that were so compelling to me. And one was the mother's fight, but the other thing was, throughout the course of the film, was the mother's flashbacks of her time and her love and her care for her children, and that time that her children were her reality, and just as the children's reality was their mother. Now, we know in America, we know the outcomes of foster care are disastrous. We know if you have been a foster child, you are more likely to commit suicide, be homeless, never go to college, be an unwed parent, and have your own children taken. We know that. We know the outcomes are disastrous. And yet we have this same mentality of believing that we can rehome a child and break all of those bonds and put them in an environment that is a stranger to them. And I even had a juvenile court judge to say to me that they were only strangers for 5 minutes. And I just shook my head. So what will it take And that is what, even having an audience that even if you've not experienced it, I tell people that I talk to that within 3 degrees of separation, if you're in a Western country such as United Kingdom, such as Norway, Australia, Canada, United States of America, within 3 degrees of separation, you know a family that's been affected. It may be your hairdresser's sister. It may be a teacher's grandchild. There is somebody within that reach that's been affected, and that is also my message. So thank you again. I encourage you as a nation to be the voice that says no more.
So I told you a bit about the case from Germany, and we will now take the discussion there. Our next speaker is Dr. Heidi Keller on the Zoom. Dr. Heidi Keller is Professor Emeritus from the Faculty of Human Sciences at Osnabrück University in Germany. She's currently director of an institution called NEVIT, the Greenhouse of Context-Informed Research and Training for Children in Need. It so happens that she spent a large part of her career working in India. She was Nehru Chair, a professor at Baroda University in Gujarat for many years. And in recent years, she has been spending a lot of her time advising German universities and social workers about cultural sensitivity when assessing immigrant parents. She also acts as an expert evaluator in court in cases of children taken away from immigrant parents, especially from Africa. Heidi Keller, on to you.
Thank you very much, Suanya, for inviting me to this important event. I feel really honored to be part of it. I thought I'm talking about Dr. Chatterjee, and I wanted to link to what she had been laid out before, but now I'm trying to make my point, and Dr. Chatterjee's contribution will fit, you will see, to what I'm saying very well. She explains what weird parenting is. Weird is an acronym for Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. That has become characteristic of a particular group of the world's population, people living in so-called Western countries in affluent middle-class contexts. And these people make up for about 5% of the world's population, so a pretty small percentage. But their psychology, the psychology of these weird people, is taken as the universal quality characteristic for caregiving all over the world. So this weird parenting is encapsulated in the so-called attachment theory. Attachment theory is a monocultural normative framework that is regarded as universally valid. Research for validating it across different cultural environments is confirmatory in that attachment researchers are only looking for confirmation and disregard and ignore other scientific and other cultural realities. So it's bad science, actually. Nevertheless, it is based in the Western middle-class family model with parents and few children living in a nuclear household. Attachment is considered to be an emotional bond that emerges out of exclusively dyadic parent-infant interactions during the first year of life. The resulting attachment quality can be secure or can have different forms of insecurity depending on the prompt, adequate, and consistent parental responses to infant cues, but only to a particular set of infant cues, that is facial cues. Face-to-face interaction is crucial, as are signs of positive emotionality in the face, smiling, both from infant and parent. talking permanently to the baby is important, as are toys that signal cognitive stimulation that is regarded as crucial. I cannot go in all the conceptual and theoretical flaws of attachment theory, but I want to stress that it is an outlier in the landscape of parenting globally, as I said before, for a very small percentage. Unfortunately, attachment theory has not only become the most popular theory of socio-emotional development worldwide, it has also made its way into numerous applied fields like early education and the ECCE conceptions, social work, counseling and psychotherapy, and others, and tragically also in family court decisions. It is the basis of the evaluations that mainly psychologists are doing and that serve as a reference for the court to take children out of their families and separate them from their parents. I had made several training seminars with these psychologists in Germany and in Austria, who all were following this ideology without questioning it at all. I noticed that it is not only the lacking information and this bad science, but also lots of stereotypes, devaluation, fear of strangers, even racism that were covered under the guise of children's well-being. We have heard about this before. I could awaken some of them, but the majority remained resistant and was not open for arguments at all. This is a thick layer of emotionality that is distorting the perception and that is deeply involved in all this work with families and these decisions. So far, I had no direct experience with families or single mothers that were affected. Often it is in Germany, single mothers also. That changed several years ago when I was approached by a voluntary helper of refugees who supported a single mom from a refugee from a West African country who had come to Germany with her 2 small children. And both of the children were taken in foster care with exactly these arguments of lacking affection when interacting with the children, of not enough face-to-face contact, of not talking and not enough cognitive stimulation. That means bad parenting in their eyes. The lawyers, family helpers, psychologists, judges, social workers, all who are involved, and it's a lot of people who are involved in those cases, take the attachment theory conception of the emotional bond for granted as universal. However, in many cultures, emotions are not openly displayed, at least not between adults and children, or appear very differently in behavior. Whereas the attachment model stresses face-to-face smiling, softly speaking, and affectionate talk, in many cultures, it is physical care, sweeping the nose, cleaning the fingernails, and things like that, that are signs of love and care. I once read an interview with a second-generation Vietnamese German, a young woman. She explained that it would be absurd when she visits her parents to hug them or tell them that she loves them, and vice versa. Her mother would ask whether she's hungry, and no matter what she answered, she would be served 10 or more wonderful dishes. So food is a major component of parental love and of sharing emotions. In the German court system, the accused is pled non-guilty until the guilt is proven, theoretically. In these cases, it is just the other way around. There are assumptions and accusations coming out of the blue, for instance, that the single mother is drug addicted, seriously depressive, etc. Now, this mother has to prove that this is not true, that this is not the case. And that's often very difficult if you go against a system that is completely acting against you. The treatment of the people by people who are supposed to help them is inhumane, disrespectful, also aggressive. with other words, unethical. I have been involved meanwhile in many cases of this kind, and I'm closely collaborating with a couple of great lawyers who understand that the system is rotten and help fighting the families and women. Suranya is one of those remarkable people. I came across the Bhattacharya family case many years back and have talked about it in numerous seminars and workshops. I have also described it in my book, The Myth of Attachment Theory. I feel so sorry for all the children and families, and I'm so impressed how Sagarika has survived and succeeded. And please, Suranya, keep going. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Heidi. Such a pleasure to see you, even if virtually. Our next speaker is Nandita Chaudhary. She is speaking to us from Salvador de Bahia in Brazil, where she is on a visiting professorship. Her entire class is watching our seminar on the live stream. Hello, Brazil. Dr. Nandita Chaudhary comes from the field of child development and family studies. She taught for 3 decades at Delhi University. Her focus has been a critical evaluation of Western theories of child development in light of the experience and mores of childcare in India and other parts of the world.
Thank you very much, Suranya. I am deeply moved by today's event, starting with the dance performance and all the eminent speakers after that. So thank you very much for having me. And Sagarika, you are an inspiration for all of us. Let me briefly outline what I'm going to talk about. As you know, the plan was for Heidi to speak after me. So I have a few more details, but there may be some overlap. So please bear with me. I'm going to start speaking about childhood and culture, and then move on to the scientific study of childhood in the field of developmental psychology and its weird nature, as Heidi has already mentioned. Then I will move on to child protection services, after which I'm going to handle a little bit about affluence and international and intercultural relationships. What needs to be done will be the concluding part. Let me start by saying that childhood is a universal developmental stage, and all societies have beliefs and practices that are valued regarding their care and protection. For every society, these beliefs have been accumulated over centuries, and families place a high emotional and moral value on culturally familiar ways of rearing children. On account of these investments, people living in a particular cultural historical setting find themselves highly invested in these practices, and any departure from these practices are evaluated as different, peculiar, or even morally wrong. All cultures have a very clear idea and ideas about what good childcare entails, and have family and community services in place. They may be formal or informal for addressing transgressions. To assume that childcare in non-Western societies is systematically either bizarre, abusive, deviant, or deficient in any way is a human rights violation. Let us see how we arrived here. Developmental psychology is the primary discipline on which global standards of children's development and family dynamics are based. However, developmental psychology, as it is applied to global child protection agencies, is not universally applicable, as Heidi has already mentioned. It is a culturally specific discipline that is only now beginning to address the relevance of cultural differences. The domination of Western psychological science has resulted in repeated misrepresentations and misunderstandings of how children are cared for. It is now being recognized that what Henrik and colleagues, I use a little bit of research information here, have demonstrated that 96% of the research on which developmental psychology is based comes from these minority countries and is applied to everyone else. And interestingly, 70% of those studies are conducted on university students. How can they be applicable to the rest of the world? Let us now arrive at the Child Protection Services. As Heidi mentioned, they are highly trained in Western developmental psychology and extremely influential in their respective countries. They have legal and political power, as we have heard. Practices were previously practices were shunned, but these are now being criminalized. Societies or groups of people, communities are being pathologized for bringing up their children in ways that they consider valuable and familiar. Thus, a science that is based on a small minority of the world's people cannot be justifiable. Along with my colleague Heidi Keller, we have worked actively towards publishing in academic circles and even public forums about this issue. Let me make a comment now about affluence in politics. In yesterday's article about Norway Cares, there was a phrase about India's multiculturalism and cultural tolerance that was mentioned by the Honorable Ambassador. I would like to comment about the term tolerance. Let us imagine a couple living happily with each other who mutually tolerate each other. I think that marriage wouldn't last. Would you agree with me? Therefore, let us move from the lukewarm term tolerance to the term mutual respect. It is not that Indians do not consider Western childcare to be odd, peculiar, and some comments we have heard from participants in India, like, why do they have children if they don't want to be sleeping next to them? So, although these are views of a community, I doubt if you could give me even one example of any Western person or family living in India whose child has been taken away on these grounds. Therefore, we must address the issue of politics between countries and the inequality in the way nations are viewed for their cultural practices. We admire the West. Sometimes I believe we admire the West too much. However, as increasing numbers of people are migrating to the West and from the West, we need to have systems in place that are more actively addressing issues of cultural difference. Not only do we treat different nations differently, I also think that poverty communities, even within countries, as was mentioned by the speaker before Heidi, poverty communities are viewed by what they don't have rather than what they have. In a recent encounter of a research group traveling to a poor community in Salvador de Bahia, the students were amazed to see how can poor people, I don't address them as poor, I would rather say people living with poverty, how can they be happy? They should be miserable. I think we forget that people define themselves differently. They have lives, they have well-being, they care and love for their children, and it is something we need to understand and respect. The politics of the wealthy needs to change. We need to shift towards approaches of mutual respect and understanding. I read in the article Norway Cares that an occasional slap will not automatically lead to action, and co-sleeping and hand feeding are not considered instances of abuse. Yet, I distinctly recall, since I have been involved with several cases, and I have followed Sagarika's case over the last 10 years. I distinctly recall that these terms were used in the intervention by CPS. Let us therefore move to the conclusion that, in fact, child protection services, through this example, are responsible for the very injustice that they promise to prevent from happening. There is a need for a global movement of child removal to be considered as a last option rather than the first option. We need diplomatic, political, cultural, academic exchanges to ensure that no child is separated from his or her parents without reasonable cause. Thank you very much, Suranya, for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for all these brilliant speeches. I'm not able to thank enough because we are really running out of time, but I do thank you. I now call upon Avnish ji idhar hai. I now call upon Shri Avnish Jain to come up and speak. He will speak to us in Hindi, and I will put a translation out later on. Avnish ji is a prominent activist in the Jain community. He reached out when he heard about Dhara and Bhavesh's situation, and he joined us when we were on a 3-day sit-in outside the German embassy. Avnish, please come and take the stage.
आप सभी को नमस्कार। दिल झकझोर देने वाली घटना है कि एक माँ से उसका 6 महीने का बच्चा छीन लिया जाता है सिर्फ इसलिए कि बच्चे को चोट लग गई। सभी चीजें क्लियर होने के बाद भी आज भी धारा और भावेश इतना परेशान है कि इसकी मैं तो इसको शब्दों में बयान नहीं कर सकता। अगस्त में मुझे पता चला, ट्विटर पे कैंपेनिंग चल रही थी कि एक जैन कपल है गुजरात और मुंबई से, जो कि जर्मनी में रहते हैं और उनका बच्चा उनसे छीन लिया गया। मैंने कोशिश की संपर्क करने की और संपर्क हुआ। आप कैसे विश्वास कर सकते हैं कि जो जैन कम्युनिटी आलू और प्याज से नफरत करती हो, आप उसे नॉनवेज खिला दें? बड़ा रोष आता है, गुस्सा आता है अपनी सरकार पर भी और सामने वाली सरकार पर भी। आप सोच सकते हैं कि अक्टूबर के महीने में जब दिल्ली में डेंगू फैला हुआ था, हमारे बहन भाई जर्मन एम्बेसी के बाहर बैठे थे सुरन्या जी के साथ। हमारा क्या दोष था? हम सिर्फ अपने बच्चे की रिहाई की मांग कर रहे थे और हमारी पुलिस ने हमें उठा के पूछताछ के लिए बिठा लिया। हमने कोशिश की, सुरन्या जी पूरी तरह से जीओ जान से इस काम में लगी हुई हैं। हमारे विदेश मंत्री ने भी जर्मन विदेश मंत्री के सामने अपनी बात रख दी। MEA आए दिन कहता है कि संवेदनशील मामला है, हम देख रहे हैं, हम कर रहे हैं। जर्मन एम्बेसडर भी कहते हैं कि हाँ, मामला संवेदनशील है, न्यायालय में है। लेकिन आपने फरवरी में इनके ऊपर जो भी केस लगे थे वो भी रिजॉल्व हो गए, लेकिन अभी ट्रायल में भी इनको कोई राहत नहीं मिली और ना ही इन्हें सुना गया। हद तो तब हो गई कि जब धारा को अपने राज्य में धरने पर बैठना पड़ा। ये कोई पॉलिटिकल या किसी कम्युनिटी विशेष का मामला नहीं है। ये मामला है हमारी संस्कृति, हमारे धर्म और मानवाधिकारों का। एक बच्चे का मौलिक अधिकार होता है कि वो अपने माँ बाप के साथ रहे, माँ बाप की उंगली पकड़ के मामा पापा बोलना सीखे, लेकिन वो सीख रही है जर्मन लैंग्वेज। और अब कहा जा रहा है कि बच्ची जर्मन में 1.5 साल से रह रही है, जर्मन खान पान में हो गई है, जर्मन संस्कृति में रच बस गई है, जर्मन बोलती है, गुजराती और इंग्लिश तो उसको आती नहीं है, तो क्यों ना बच्ची को जर्मन में ही रखा जाए। अरे आप लोगों के पास बच्चों की कमी है तो आप कहिए, आप मांगिए हमसे बच्चे, छीनिए मत। क्या बीती होगी उस माँ के ऊपर जिसकी दूध मोही बच्ची को, दूध पीती हुई बच्ची को आपने छीन लिया उससे। आप चाइल्ड प्रोटेक्शन की बात करते हैं, आप बात बाल अधिकारों की करते हैं। एक हिंदुस्तान में तो एक बच्चा 4 दिन के लिए मौसी और नानी या बुआ के यहाँ चला जाए तो माँ के लिए विफल जाता है कि माँ कहाँ है। और आपने उस दूध मोही बच्ची को एक अनाथों की तरह दूसरे जिनको वो जानती नहीं उनके पास छोड़ रखा है। बहुत अपील हो गई, बहुत ट्विटर पे कंपेयरिंग चला। विदेश मंत्री जी आई जर्मन की, हमारे विदेश मंत्री जी ने कहा कि मामला है बच्चे की संस्कृति से, बच्चे के धर्म से, बच्चे के खान पान से जुड़ा हुआ है, बहुत ही जरूरी और बहुत ही संवेदनशील मामला है। मैडम जी ने कह दिया कि कोर्ट देखेगा, मैं इसमें कुछ नहीं कर सकता। अरे कोर्ट क्या देखा, कोर्ट तो तब देखता जब हमारे यहां से, मतलब हमारे देश से 7 जर्मन को रिपोर्ट किया गया विदाउट एनी लीगल एक्शन। जब हम आपके साथ छोड़ सकते तो आप हमारी बच्ची नहीं छोड़ सकते। अरे माँ बाप को फांसी देना, आपको 2 धारा भावेश को फांसी, लेकिन आप उस बच्ची को तो कम से कम उसकी संस्कृति और धर्म में पलने का मौका दीजिए। ये कोई मंच किसी को ऊपर आरोप लगाने का नहीं है, लेकिन जो जर्मन में या यूरोपियन कंट्रीज में, मैं पहली बार सोनिया जी के साथ जंतर मंतर पर सागरिका जी से मिला और मीडिया वाला हम दोनों के एक साथ इंटरव्यू कर रहा था। जब इनकी दर्द भरी दास्तां 2 मिनट में सुनी, मतलब 2 मिनट आप सोच सकते 2 मिनट में कौन क्या बोल सकता है, आंखों में आंसू आ गए। आपने दोनों बच्चे छीन लिए उनके। मैम आप धन्य हो, आपके साहस है, और साहस है सोनिया जी का और उनके साथ जितने भी लोग इस कार्य में लगे हुए हैं उनका, कि आप अपनी बच्ची को पा सके हैं। और आज हम मिसेस चटर्जी वर्सेस नैरोबी आपका सम्मान कर रही है, पूरे वर्ल्ड को दिखा रही है कि एक माँ की ममता क्या होती है, एक माँ का साहस क्या होता है। हम आपका बहुत सल्यूट करते हैं आपको। और इस मंच से, ये इंटरनेशनल मंच है, मुझे इंग्लिश का ज्यादा वो नहीं है, सौंदर्य जी हमारी बात आप तक पहुंचा देंगी। बस सिर्फ इतना ही कहना चाहूंगा, भारत सरकार से भी, अपनी सरकार से भी, हम बात कर रहे हैं वसुधैव कुटुंबकम, और इस सेमिनार में घेरे में है कुटुंब। हम कहते हैं कि एक राष्ट्र, एक परिवार, एक भविष्य। क्या यही भविष्य देखना है? माफी चाहूंगा, लेकिन दिल से कहना पड़ेगा, अब सबको कहना पड़ेगा और एक आवाज में कहना पड़ेगा कि हमारी बच्ची हमें वापस करो। हमें नहीं चाहिए आपकी नौकरियां, लेकिन हम अपने संस्कृति से, अपने धर्म से खिलवाड़ नहीं कर सकते और अपने बच्चों को तो नहीं सौंप सकते आपको। आज आवश्यकता है पूरे देश में इस बात पे जो लोग काम कर रहे हैं वो एकजुट हों और धारा बावेसी नहीं। अभी तो और पता चला कि और भी बच्चियां और बच्चे फंसे हुए हैं जो कि सामने नहीं आ पा रहे। सागरिका जी ने कोशिश की, और भी फैमिलीज ने कोशिश की, धारा भावेश ने कोशिश की। सभी को बाहर निकलना पड़ेगा लड़ाई लड़नी पड़ेगी, हमें अपने बच्चों को वापस लाना होगा। मेरा पुनः अपनी सरकार से और जर्मन सरकार से निवेदन है कि हमारी बच्ची हमें वापस करो। सुरन्या जी का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद कि उन्होंने मुझे अपनी बात रखने का मौका दिया। धन्यवाद।
बहुत शुक्रिया अवनीश जी। I now invite Dhara and Bhavesh Shah to come and address the gathering. It's taken a lot of courage for them to do this. They are still under scrutiny in an irretrievably unfair and almost doomed process in Germany. They have been knocking on every door only to have their daughter sent back to India. The daughter is a passport holding Indian citizen. She has her heritage here. She has her identity here. That's all they are asking for, and it has not been considered. Please, Betty. Can I have the mic? Thank you. So Dhara and Bhavesh, you're here now before this audience and before an international audience. आप हिंदी में बोलिए, that's fine. आप क्या कहना चाहेंगे? आप क्या कहना चाहेंगे दुनिया को? आपकी क्या अपील है?
It's like we are fighting from like last 19 months. We have been alleged for like we have done a sexual abuse of our child, which was like very severe charges on us. We can't even imagine such charges being a parents. Though the charges have been already been dropped last year on February 2022, still we haven't got our child back, and they are just dragging the case. We don't know, like we are here in India to seek some help from the government of India. So we are not asking for any help regarding us. We are just asking that our child should be reported to India under the care of like kinship placement. Meanwhile, we continue our custody battle in Germany.
Thank you, Bhavesh. I think that Dhara is now ready, and I want her to be strong, and I want her to speak.
उन्होंने आरोप डालने की कोशिश की कि हमने कोई गुनाह किया है हमारी बेटी के साथ। फिर उन्होंने ही बोला हमने कोई गुनाह नहीं किया है, तो फिर बच्ची को दूर रख के कौन से गुनाह की सजा दे रहे हैं? अगर गुनाह नहीं किया है तो बच्ची को क्यों दूर रख रहे हैं? अगर कोई गलती की है फांसी पे चढ़ाओ, हम हर जगह पे सामने हैं। हमें आजाद कर दिया, हमें गुनाह नहीं किया, उन्होंने गुनाह से भी बरी कर दिया कि नहीं किया है, आजाद कर दिया, बेगुनाह कर दिया, तो बच्ची क्यों नहीं दे रहे? और बच्ची को कौन से गुनाह की सजा दे रहे कि वो एक इंडियन कल्चर में जन्मी है, एक इंडियन पेरेंट्स के वहां पे, वो एक जर्मन पेरेंट्स के वहां पे नहीं जन्मी, इसलिए क्योंकि हम हमारे देश में नहीं थे, हमको भाषा नहीं आती थी, हम हमारी चीज नहीं रख पा रहे थे। 19 महीने से अब सोचो अगर माँ बाप पे ऐसा आरोप लगाओ ना, उनको लिए जीना तो मौत भी बहुत खराब होती है। हम लोग हर पल ये मौत जी रहे हैं, और इससे भी ज्यादा हमको दिक्कत होती है हमारी बच्ची किस हाल में। जब कोर्ट अपॉइंटेड साइकोलॉजिस्ट बोलती है बच्ची पेरेंट्स के साथ रह सकती है, और जब बच्ची 3 साल की या 6 साल की होगी तो बच्ची को पूछा जाएगा कि उसको क्या चाहिए। बच्ची अभी 2 साल की हुई, बच्ची अभी बोल रही है कि मुझे पेरेंट्स के साथ जाना है। बच्ची बोल रही है जो मम्मा पापा गए हैं, मतलब होता है मुझे मम्मा पापा के साथ जाना है। बच्ची मुझे बोल रही मम्मा कोम मित, मतलब मम्मा साथ चल। बच्ची बोल रही है तो क्यों सुना नहीं जा रहा? एक माँ बोल रही है तो क्यों नहीं सुना जा रहा? चलो 1 मिनट के लिए मान ले कि पेरेंट्स ठीक नहीं है, ओके, पर उन्होंने कोई भी इंडियन फैमिली को देना सही नहीं समझा। इसका क्या मतलब है? कोई भी भारतीय परिवार, कोई भी इंडियन फैमिली इज नॉट एबल टू टेक केयर ऑफ एन इंडियन चाइल्ड। सो इसका मतलब है वो लोग चाहते हैं कि सारे इंडियन बच्चों को फॉस्टर केयर में डालना चाहिए, क्योंकि इंडियन पेरेंट्स को तो आता नहीं है बच्चों को रखना। अगर हम ठीक नहीं है तो इतनी हमारी कंट्री कितनी बड़ी है, हमारा समाज कितना बड़ा है, और हमारे समाज में इतने सारे लोग हैं जो बिना मनी, क्योंकि वहां पे जो फॉस्टर सिस्टम चल रहा है ना, पैसा देना बंद करो फिर कौन बच्चे को रखता है। हमारे वहां पूरा परिवार है, पूरा समाज है जो बिना पैसे को बच्चे को रखेगा, उतना ही प्यार देगा। अब उन्हें पैसा देना छोड़ दो। पैसे के लिए जो बच्चों को रखने वाले आप उससे जो बिना पैसे के सिर्फ प्यार से बच्चे को रखने वाले उनसे तोल रहे हैं। सागरिका मेरे लिए रोल मॉडल है, हर बार टूटती हूँ उसको देख के, हिम्मत आती है कि वो अपनी बच्ची को ला पाए, मैं भी मेरी बच्ची को ला पाऊंगी। यहाँ पे एक्सपर्ट से बोला फॉस्टर केयर सिस्टम कितनी खराब है, अपनी बच्ची को मैं खराब लाइफ नहीं देना चाहती। मैं भी चाहती हूँ कि सागरिका के बच्चों के जैसे मेरे बच्चे भी मेरे साथ खुशहाल रहे, मेरी बच्ची भी मेरे पास आए।
She will be back. She will be back. And thank you for coming here and doing this. You're going to get your baby back. Thank you, Bhavesh and Dhara. Thank you. I now call upon Prayatna Kowitz on the Zoom. Prayatna is a disability rights and social justice advocate. She has done her master's in childhood studies and children's rights. She's currently pursuing doctoral studies from Germany. She's interested in the experience of minority communities and how they confront multiple forms of discrimination. And she has shown a keen interest in the Shah case, both from a children's rights perspective and from a minority community perspective.
Thank you, Saranya, and good evening, good morning, good afternoon to all of you present here. My interest in Ariha's case started fairly early when, I'd seen some posts on social media from the Shah family. And my interest in the case is from, of course, a child rights perspective, but a child rights perspective that is representative of a minority community's experiences in the child protection system in Germany. Now, while I was examining the case from the position of discrimination and racism, it dawned upon me that there's something much larger at play here, meaning, the experiences of minority community children had led to a point, a position where I realized that there needs to be a reconceptualization of the entire child welfare system. Now, as I began to dig deeper and deeper, I realized that it's not just in Germany, but all across countries in the global north, where there is a disproportionate representation of children from the BIPOC, so Black, Indigenous, people of color community in the child welfare system, right? What I'm going to do, what I'm aiming for during the course of my very short talk is that I'm going to be looking or trying to explain this position of minority community experiences, while also giving some examples as to how this might look in the case of Ariha's position in Germany, right? So the disproportionate representation of children from BIPOC communities in the child welfare system. This has led to an understanding that we must work towards ending systems that are harmful, racist, and discriminatory in order to build a liberated society, right? So what does that mean? What does a truly liberated society mean? A truly liberated society is one from a social justice or a social workers perspective. It is one where all members of society are treated equal, are considered equal. So in the case of Ariha Shah, that would mean Ariha be treated as an equal member of society. What would that look like? For example, that would look like, as one example of many, it would also look like giving Ariha the right to have consular access, which he currently at the moment is not being given, right? This is not just, now this stance and this position is not just about ending or dismantling harmful systems, but rather building societies where the need for these harmful racist systems is obsolete, right? So we have to understand that this is a civil case, right? So in civil cases, the termination of parents' right is the termination of parental rights is the most severe and permanent outcome that can result. It is the equivalent, if just to give you an example of how harsh the sentencing, so to speak, is the equivalent in the criminal justice system would be the death penalty. So this is the highest, in a family court, in a civil case, this is the most extreme judgment that can be passed on a family, which is the termination of parental rights. Now, if we have been following academic, not just academic, but also if we've been following the news about cases of the, of criminal cases where, you come across lives of individuals and lives of families that are completely destroyed because of a wrongful conviction, it can lead one to also rethink and reimagine what would that look like in a civil case like this one, right? What happens in cases of wrongful convictions in a civil court where parental rights have been terminated? What happens then? What happens to the families? What happens to the children? What happens to the parents? What happens to the community, right? So what I'm aiming at is that what both Sagarika and the Shah family case show is that on part of child welfare authorities is that there seems to be a significant dissonance between intention and outcome. So what happens is there is an escalation that stems from concern for the child's well-being, leading to state intervention, leading to further escalation, leading to removal of the child from the family, leading to a further escalation, which is the total termination of parental rights, right? So what is the intention? The intention is, well, I'm concerned about a particular child. What is the outcome? This is the outcome, right? Individuals who rarely think of themselves as state actors, right? That can be a doctor, that can be a concerned neighbor who's concerned about a loud fight in somebody's house, inadvertently trigger a situation that is eerily similar to, it's a strong word to use, but triggers a situation that's eerily similar to incarceration of the child, right? So the policing of the family unit, because in the end, from a minority community perspective, this is what experiences of children of our community and families from our communities experience the child protection services or child welfare system as, which is policing of the family unit. Isn't what is keeping all children safe, right? Just as, theoretically, I'm leaning a little on Foucault here. Just as prisons are meant to keep public safe, what do the ideas of prisons do in society is that it creates a binary. It creates a binary of good versus evil. These are the good people in society, and there are a few bad actors in society that we need prisons to keep you safe from them for, right? That's the construction or the reasoning behind upholding of the prison system. But rarely that is the case. That is, rarely do prison as a system actually work. If anything, all prisons set out to do is to serve as a means and a mode of punishment. So if the child protection system or if prisons are not keeping us safe, are not keeping our families safe, what is? These are systems that are built on old, archaic, and problematic constructions of society, which is deeply rooted in anti-blackness and is deeply rooted in colonialism, right? So there was interestingly a report from February 2022, an investigation and a report by the European Commission, which stated and which acknowledged the widespread problem that the Federal Republic of Germany has with racism in its Behörde, that is authorities, right? So you could say police, child protection, all of them are considered authorities. So there is, it's not one or two people who are saying, yes, the system is problematic and discriminatory towards minority communities. The European Commission is also backing up, is also saying the same thing about institutional racism on part of authorities in Germany. Now, to go back to this particular case of family Shah, what incarceration of the child does in this case is that it perpetuates harm and dismantles families and communities. So what do we do in these situations? I've thought about this question actually quite a lot when Suranya had, asked me whether I'd like to say a few words in the seminar. And I actually realized that this is exactly one of the many things that we need to do, which is that create a counter hegemony, create these dialogues, create these spaces where we take charge of telling our own stories of our experiences within these systems. So Suranya, this is absolutely also from a decolonial perspective, not just that of advocacy. This is absolutely brilliant, and hats off to you for what you've been able to do and organize so far. Further, I'm going to try to wind up a little bit here. What I'm aiming to get at is that the child protection system is similarly ineffective, especially from perspectives of Black, Indigenous, and people of color perspectives. It serves as punishment. Who is being punished in the Shah family case, I think, is very obvious to all of us. Where also the child is, if you follow the legal debate, it is very unlikely, from where we are at right now, that the child will not be released until one of the parents takes responsibility. To go back to that binary document, dichotomy of good parent, bad parent, good people, bad people, until one of the parents takes responsibility for being a so-called bad parent, thus making them available for punishment within the carceral system, right? This represents a system of domination we live in, which is that of white supremacy and heteropatriarchy, which is steeped in both notions of racism and sexism. There are several examples of the Shah family case where this argument can not just be made, but upheld. This brings us to a point where we need to realize, where we need to balance a desire to acknowledge the stated intentions of everyone involved in family intervention to keep the child safe, to question what would safety look like for specific children. So what would it look like really to keep Ariha safe? From her position, what would it look like? Whom do children, this is the larger question, again, minority community perspective, whom do children actually belong to? Whom does Ariha actually belong to? If you say maybe the parents, if you question whether the parents are capable or not of being her, of raising Ariha, if you say there is enough grounds to believe she needs to be taken out of the family system, out of their care, whom does she actually belong to? Does she belong within this child protection system, or does she belong to all of us, to us as a larger community? Like Hara has already said, there are enough and more families in Germany who are willing to look after not just Ariha, but other children like Ariha, without without any cost factor or profitability being involved or brought into the picture at all, right? So in the end, there are two things I would really like to conclude by saying. Also with respect, the first one is with respect to Suranya's work. As members of visible minority communities living in the global north, engaging in such dialogue and advocacy is necessary to create our own counter-hegemonies and participate in the writing of our own histories. The second thing I would like to conclude by saying is that for members of Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities themselves, We need to have an awareness and develop a consciousness of our positions of marginalization in the global north, and to join hands in solidarity with your own communities or extended communities. This act, or the act of dismantling or addressing the harms that that discriminatory state systems impose upon us, in order to demand that our children be given back to us. The child welfare system causes children and families of our community the dismantling of the child welfare system, and the bringing back of children of our community is not the job of one individual family or the job of one individual family. It is our collective burden and our collective responsibility to shoulder and carry in order to ensure socially just futures, at least for the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to request all the speakers, I'm sorry to do this to you, but if you could reduce as much as you can, shave a couple of minutes off so that we can hear from all of you. I now invite Ruby Harrell Claerson to address us via Zoom. Ruby is a Jamaican married to a Swede and living in Sweden. She's a lawyer and founder of a group called the Nordic Committee for Human Rights. Ruby's organization helps families in all Nordic countries to fight for justice against unfair and illegal child removals. Ruby.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's afternoon here in Sweden. And also, thank you very much, Sorania, for this symposium. And thank you, Sagarika, for your bravery and for your book and your film. This is going to be, I hope it's going to be a game changer for the world, or for the Scandinavian countries and the foreign children who are being taken into care in these countries. Let me introduce myself. Sorania introduced me, but I have worked with CPS cases in Sweden since 1990. I am the president of the Nordic Organization for Human Rights, and we have contact thereby to other Scandinavian countries and their cases. There are similar cases all over Scandinavia. In 2014, the Nordic Committee for Human Rights sent a petition to the European community asking them to look into the problems with the taking of children into care in Sweden and the Nordic countries. Unfortunately, the European Commission, the European Parliament did nothing. So we were called to a hearing in 2016, but after that, they have done nothing. A little about myself, I work with client cases, and so far I have saved 109 children from the social services in Sweden. We meet so much ruthlessness and arrogance, and it's mostly foreign children who are being taken. Of course, they take Swedish children also, but foreign children make up the majority of the children that are being taken. And there was a case not too long ago, the Liz Eden case. Well, it was from the end of the 1990s. She was a British citizen. Her child was taken into care, and she was so distraught. She slashed her wrist and she tore off her hair. The pain was so deep, and the social workers told her that she should go to the mental hospital and they would help her. But then when she went to the mental hospital to get help, and she went back to the social services, they said, but you have been in at the mental hospital. You can't get your child back. So it was it was such a cruel situation. I tried to help her, but she never got her child back. And the problem is also that there's a collaboration between the magistrates in the administrative courts and the social services. One social worker said to me at one time that the administrative courts, they are our courts, as that means their courts. I told them, I thought that the administrative courts were part of the legal system, so that they were to be fair and they should apply the rule of law like every other court. I didn't get an answer to that, but I have seen from my experience of working with CPS cases for 20 years that the administrative courts are the courts of the social services. They always get right. Marius Ricuro said that the system is biased towards the government and the social services. Yeah, that's true. It's for Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Finland the same. And of course, England also has problems. And other countries, Belgium, Holland, Germany, you find it almost in all European countries because they tend to try to have harmonize the systems, but harmonizing the systems is not good for the population or the people involved. I can tell you about a case that I worked with, the Dominique Johansson case. This was a case where India was involved. Dominique's mother was Indian, his father Swedish. So Dominique had both Swedish and Indian citizenship. When Dominique was to start school, the parents wanted him to go to a school that was not like the Swedish school. They wanted him to go to a private school with not too many children and a different kind of pedagogy. So they decided to move back to India and put him in private school there. And the parents sold off all their property and they left to the airport. But the social workers realized that they were leaving, and she sent the message to the police, the airport police, and the parents had already checked in, their luggage was on the plane, everything. And the plane was boarded, and a police officer said he wanted to talk with Dominique. And of course, the parents descended with Dominique. So the plane left for India with their baggage and everything, and they were left. And when they got off the plane, Dominique had already disappeared. The social workers were waiting there, and they took him and went off with him. And we put up a long struggle, and we failed at every level. And even they made a transfer of the guardianship of Dominique to the Swedish foster parents. And he was, we had the intervention of the Indian government through the embassy, but unfortunately, Dominique being half Swedish and half Indian, they were unable to do anything. And there was a transfer of the guardianship. Dominique is now 18 years old, and he has very little contact with his parents. Their relationship was so destroyed that, and Annie, she is the shadow of the person she was before. She has lost weight, and she is so depressed. It's a wonder that she is alive. We have, I might also apologize for not being with you. I should have been there, but unfortunately I had a case in court yesterday and it was booked before, so I had to take it. I was in Stockholm, and that is the case of an African family. They came to Sweden in 2012 with 2 children, and 6 months later, the little daughter was taken because one morning when she didn't want to school, her mother was a bit brusque with her and told her, you have to go to school. But she was having problems in the class because she was the only Black child in the class. And she didn't feel comfortable. And she had one friend, but some other children told that a child not to play with her. And of course, he didn't play with her anymore. So she didn't want to go to school. And the mother brushed her simply and said, no, you have to go to school. She was a bit harsh in her tone. And the little girl cried. She went to school. Someone saw that the child had cried. And immediately from further, we had whole coop of fowls. And the mother was, both parents were accused of abusing the child, and she was taken into care immediately. Both parents were prosecuted. The father was acquitted. The mother was sentenced to 6 months imprisonment and to pay a heavy fine to her daughter. But she appealed to the Svea Court of Appeal, which is one of the most eminent courts in Sweden. It's in Stockholm. She was completely exonerated, but still today, the social workers demand that the mother must admit that she ill-treated her child, or she'll never get her child back. The little girl will be 18 in December of this year. That's the way the Swedish system works. That's the way the Swedish government works. And that's the way how the Swedish legal system can destroy children and families. Another case I can tell you about is the case of 3 American citizen children who were visiting in Sweden in 2018. They were left alone one day because they didn't want to accompany their stepfather into Norway. And a neighbor who had some grievances with their stepfather demanded that, or reported the children to the social services that they were alone. Those children were 8, 10, and 12, so they could take care of themselves for one day. Anyway, they were told that they would get help to get back to their father in America. But instead of taking the children to the American embassy, they were taken to the social services, and they were immediately taken into care. And the family contacted me, and of course I took the case. And we had to fight for 20 months to get those children out of Sweden. And during that time, the Swedish government paid the foster carers 87,000 Swedish crowns per child and month. And in the 20 months the children were in foster care, that was a total of 4 million Swedish crowns. So there's a lot of big money in this system. And we have submitted a complaint to the European Court of Human Rights, and we are awaiting a second decision. In the first decision, we were told that we should have demanded compensation from the Swedish government. The Swedish government has changed the law that says that you are to first, when you have completed all the different stages of the procedure, all the way to the Supreme Court, you can take it to the European Court of Human Rights. That is what the European Convention states. But Sweden in 2016 passed a law saying that we have to go to the Chancellor of Justice. Now, the Chancellor of Justice is a political appointment, and the Swedish authorities decide what happens in that authority. We took it to this Chancellor of Justice, but the Chancellor of Justice refused to pay compensation to the parents. And now we have sent the case back to the European Court of Human Rights, trying to show them, and we will show them, we'll establish for them that taking complaints to the Chancellor of Justice is not the way to get to re-vindicate any human rights failures in the Swedish system. I know that you're running out of time, but this is something that Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and so many other countries in Europe are now practicing. And it's good that we have this film, Sagarika and Sorania. You have done a very good job, and keep up the good work. And I hope that we will be able to meet sometime and welcome back. And by the way, I can inform everyone that Sagarika got the Nordic Committee's honors diploma for her bravery and her accomplishments at our symposium in 2018. And no, 2021. No, sorry, 2022, that was last year. Sorry about my mixing up the dates. Well, thank you very much for having me, Sorania, and continued good luck with everything, and wishing you all the best for the rest of this symposium.
Thank you. Thank you, Ruby. So good to see you from here. I now
Thank
call
you.
upon Ova Knarvik, who flew all the way from Norway to be with us. I'm very sorry to tell you that he is himself a victim of Barneverner. His beloved son was taken away. And he has dedicated his life to activism on this issue. Over.
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak the case that is so common throughout the Western world. My name is Ove Dag Narvik, and I am ethnic Norwegian, as you may see. The CPS has got unlimited power. Decisions by CPS are taken without any quality assurance and evidence-based proof of parental inadequacy. We have several examples. Doctors and psychologists have experienced that CPS want them to file false reports. The politicians are not willing to discuss power of abuse. done by CPS. And oops. I need to, oh, just a second. I need to. Yeah. Neither the authorities nor the CPS are willing to listen to any form of constructive criticism or suggestion to changes. We are talking to deaf ears. When we present disasters done to kids and their families, the answer is, we cannot discuss single cases. But when there are thousands of catastrophic cases, then we are no longer talking about single cases, but the total system failure. The attitude in CPS is that it is better to intervene in 10 families too many than to let one child slip through their fingers, which means 10 disasters for each child they kind of rescue. This attitude and culture must be brought to an end, cost whatever it takes. The condition in homes must be extremely bad if kids shall benefit in public care. This is a proven fact. However, many experts have made it a profession and have their main source of income from children being placed in public care. Yeah. John Bowlby, a psychologist, said in the 60s that kids' separation from parents is the most important reason for later psychological suffering and diseases. It has dramatic consequences for the development of the children's personality. Other research work is saying that the development of the brain of children placed in public care slows down. It is damaging their intellectual development and skills. In USA, National Coalition for Child Protection Reform followed 15,000 children in public care from childhood to adult and compared the result up against the score of children growing up in homes equal to those homes foster care kids were removed from. The result is very clear in favor of biological homes. Why on earth does the Norwegian CPS and our political leadership totally ignore this clearly result from very serious modern research? KIB, an organization in Norway fighting for humanity in our CPS system, is saying the same. Due to criticism, the government once in a while appoint commissions to investigate the CPS system. These commissions are put together of experts connected in one way or another to the system. None of us with first-hand experience of the work done by CPS are allowed to take part. I therefore question the legality of the result. It is very close to compare this to a thief that shall investigate himself or his crime and conclude. The worst trauma a child can experience is by force being placed with strangers. That is undoubtedly clear in all modern research. Many, many kids in public care, they choose to end their life. And so is the case for also some of the parents losing their kids. And here I refer to NIB report 2005-12, a Norwegian research ordered by the government that showed 8 times higher suicide rate among kids in public care compared to all other groups in the society. The report didn't comply with the expectation and was placed in a drawer. In public care, kids are subjected to harsh manipulation and parental alienation. CPS is telling bad things about their parents. In my case, my son has been told I am dangerous. And by the way, I got a mail yesterday evening from the CPS telling me that they want to change the name of my son to the name of his foster father, which I of course deny. Taking children from other families are today a very big business in Norway. Foster parents are well paid and they do anything to keep the kids. Private institutions today get between $1,000 and $5,000 per kid per day. The authorities deny that this has to do with money. But the fact is, it is all about money. Many public employees are involved in lucrative child protection companies. Foreign companies are investing in lucrative industrial child protection system in Norway. Ref article in newspapers in Norway a few years ago about the huge profit. Changes in the system are difficult because too many experts and lawyers depends on the system as their main source of income. This system is corrupt. Psychologists are appointed by CPS and paid by them to evaluate the parental skills. They are taught how to write reports in order for the CPS to win in court. Psychologists in favor of the parents do not get any more work. There are no audio recordings which lead to that lies follow each individual case through all court systems. The CPS does not have to prove anything, only give a probability of minimum 51%. This is often done by false accusation and false reports without any evidence at all to back it up. I have personally been accused for alcoholism, violence, and sexual abuses in falsified reports. I proved them wrong. They did this because they could not prove inadequacy in my parental skills. It scared the judges to adopt my son. Judges should ask critical questions to the CPS, which is never done. Messages of concern are seldom or never checked for realities. If children shall be removed, the police must prove that the reason for placing kids in public care is within the law. Today, no such control is done whatsoever. Even a leader in a CPS office that in writing, this is remarkable, told an employee to lie. She was acquitted in court. The court accepted lies and criminal acts from employees in the CPS. I have experienced to be lied about and lied to from the CPS. Good people in CPS are forced into a culture where brute force is prevailing humanity and respect for others. Employees, they do not talk with you, but about you and to you. Whatever you say in meeting is twisted and rewritten. Falsified minutes of meetings are presented as the truth in court. Finn Abrahamsen, a former chief of police, has gone through audio recordings of conversation with the employees in CPS and compared it with written minutes of meeting. The minutes of meetings are full of lies. The CPS has to lose their power to remove kids from their biological families. That is the only way. Barnevernet use psychological expression like mentalization. which means ability to understand others, including themselves and their relations to others. Parents are accused of lacking mentalization abilities. The truth is that it is the employees in CPS that often lack mentalization skills, in addition to politeness and respect for other people. In court, CPS are scaring the judges by saying that their opinion are in the best interest of children. That scares the judges to make falsified judgment. And in the CPS, there is too many narcissists. Okay, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here and having this opportunity.
I now call upon Tur Åge Barglid from Norway on the Zoom. Tur belongs to a group called Barnet's Best, which means the best interests of the child, a phrase that is used by child services all over the world to justify anything and everything, but never ever the true best interests of any child. Tours is an activist and advocacy group which has been exposing injustice by Norway's Child Protection Agency for several years. He's a good friend of mine and is going to do me a huge favor by only speaking for 3 minutes. Thanks.
Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, because it came a message here. Yes, thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the previous host guest. What he said is 110% my same testimonial. It's system, that's the system, it's how it works, so some places at least. And my background, I'm a pilot, and in aviation we have a lot of psychology. And I would say that this system is constructed on purpose of pure evilness. It's a mismanaged culture, and really what we call a controlled flight into terrain. They know about it, but they don't want to correct it. They don't want to admit it. And if you don't want to admit it, then this movie is, I will give you an example. If you don't want to admit it, you can't learn. Yesterday, I want to thank the producer of the movie. She was on earlier, and I agree with Marius that Estonian actors, it really hit me hard because it's exactly, I don't even know if they know it, but it's exactly how it works. This terrorism going on in the homes of people. And the movie was not overplayed at all. As you heard, this people crying, frustration, the darkness, everything. You're put into a dark hole. And the movie was actually of such a character that I'm sure this must be going on to Hollywood. My own story is even worse than Sagarita. It's the same story, it's the same fight, and we have thousands of people doing this fight. But we don't get the commitment in Norway. You're so it's so important for us to have the support from abroad. So I would also ask any media, any onboard flight magazine, any TV stations, any radio stations or whatever, please note my name, and I will provide you with witnesses, stories, and I also have solutions. It's so easy to fix this problem because instead of removing, like to say, the best interest of the child is to take it out of the home, and they use attachment theory. My sister, she was a leader in the kindergarten, and she says, like, well, we spend so much time in trying to be in the kindergarten the first time with the children. You have to stay there the half the day, etc., etc. So in one hand, the state is demanding you to spend time with the state in the kids, but when they do an emergency takeover, they just remove them from their toys, from their beds, from the room, from everything that is secure, from their neighbors, from the sports activities, church activities, everything, and place to total stranger people. How on earth is it possible to not see that this is damaging the children? And that's why they do it. The industry now is doing emergency takeover to jump over all the rights that you have as a citizen. And then they stresses the children, they damage them on purpose, because then the foster parents show up in court and say, the kids didn't sleep the first week, but after 1 week without the parents, now they start to relax. Okay, so less time with the parents is good for them, and then they continue. And it's true that they make a lot of money. And I also have a tape recording of corruption. I used to be a lay judge, and the phone was left back in the room. It was my own case. And you clearly hear the lawyers talking about how to kind of win the case, how to get the parents out of the case, etc. And their interest is that it will create more cases, more appeals, and more conflicts. So Barnevernet is actually going in and creating conflicts. And as we saw in this movie, Sagarita and the husband went apart, and that's a typical outcome. I'm going to end up now and saying that I was actually in the movie yesterday, and there was a panel, and I was allowed to say some words in end. And one of the people there posted today on her wall. She's a caseworker in Barnevernet. She said the movie was good, etc., etc., etc. And then she does this typical thing. But I have to say that the movie is showing unreal ways of how a case is worked on, etc., etc. And immediately there, because she's a good person, she wants to change the system from inside. But then I would say, is the movie the problem, or are you actually saying that the movie is disclosing real problems in Barnevernet that I am taking a distance from? And that's a totally different story. It's a totally different resume. And then you can imagine how it looks in a child protective case when they can't even get a review of a movie correct. Because it's not the movie that is the problem. The problem is, like Ove said before, I want you to really listen to what he said. It's 100% true. And the only way to win this is to wake up Norway and send all international media, and we will help you. And when you make the next movie, we will give you even better examples of details in the movie. And I hope this movie really gets to Hollywood. And I want to say thank you to the Indian community, and also for hosting this meeting. And feel free to ask any questions. And thank you so much. And we will try our best to promote the movie here. And I have some ideas how to do that in the next couple of weeks. So again, this movie was my first Bollywood movie. I looked at the time after 1 hour and 30, and I said, I'm not even bored. And you needed the whole 2 hours to tell the movie. And I was really impressed about this movie. And I think the Norwegian authorities will have a problem now of using the typical communication strategy, because this movie is really showing the truth. So thank you again.
Thank you, Tor. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is again from Norway, Ines Isabel Arnesen. Like Sagarika, she too lost her children and won them back.
Yes.
And her story was covered by BBC World. And she's here to tell it to you.
Well, you told me to be short, so I will just say that I was accused of violence, and I had to fight for my children. And it took almost 5 years before all the children were returned. You know, the feedback I want to give is really in regards to the movie, because I got lots of feedback yesterday from both immigrant families and from Norwegians who said that this movie really captured how it is to stand against the CPS. And I have 2 points that I think is important to convey in regards to what needs to be done. We are talking about a flawed system. Parents are provided legal representation, with free legal representation. And that sounds great, but it's not. The lawyer is limited in hours and the payment is fixed. So if a lawyer has to set in more hours in order to prepare, they are not compensated. The lawyer the lawyer who represents the child protection system have no limitations in hours, and they are, they can write the fee that they want for their job. And that is the working conditions for the lawyers representing the parents have to improve, because it jeopardizes families' legal certainty and also jeopardizes basic human rights. So that is one thing that has to be changed in the system. There is also another thing that needs to be addressed, and that is in the BBC documentary, I was talking about the lack of transparency. There is only the state administrator where the parents can complain if they feel that things are handled wrong by the CPS. But there is not a system in itself that monitors all the different CPS offices and all the cases that they have. And that is something that needs to come in place in order to make sure that there is transparency and that, the CPS gets all the help they need in order to ensure that they do all the jobs that they are supposed to, especially in regards to ensuring that reunification can be done. After my case and after I was vindicated in court and kids have been returned, I have been working as a cultural mediator. I see that, there are great difficulties for parents to understand the system, but there is also huge difficulties for the caseworkers to understand the parents also, because they lack knowledge of in regards to the cultures that the different parents come from. So, that has to change also. So, and take, for instance, you might have an interpreter attend a meeting, and that is good. But later on, you might get the minutes from that meeting, and that is written in Norwegian and provides no interpretation or anything in regards to understanding what you are receiving in your documents. That also has to change. So, well, I tried to be quick and give the points that I thought were important so that you can go to the next person and have them present what they are supposed to present. Thank you for letting me take part. Bye.
Thank you. That was so clear, and thank you for obliging with the time. I now call upon Pat Albright and Carolyn Hill. Pat Albright, they're both from the USA. Pat is someone I've known for several years. I found her work particularly easy to connect with, as it uses a language that is familiar to us in India of social work for the poor. In Europe, you never find that word being used anymore, even though there is a lot of what looks like poverty to me over there, including among native European populations. Pat will be speaking along with her colleague, Carolyn Hill. They both belong to an organization called Give Us Back Our Children, which is in turn part of a wider international network called Support, Not Separation. Pat and Caroline.
Carolyn, do you want to start? Yeah.
Yes. Hi, my name is Carolyn Hill. I'm a mother of 5, 2 deceased, 17 grandchildren, and 3 great-grands.
Right.
I was in the welfare system. I also worked at a factory where I was injured and put on disability. The Department of Child Welfare here in Philadelphia, we call DHS, gave me 2 of my nieces. After a year, they came and took them back from me. They took them after saying that they was doing well in my home, and one of them was going to a therapist, and the therapist told them if they removed the child that she would have a setback. They end up removing both of the kids from my home, and my niece did have a setback. On one of the visits, when I did get to see her, her hair had fell out. You could see the bones where she wasn't eating. And then they started medicating her. They took them and traumatized my nieces. And the fact of taking the kids from me and medicating them, it's like they profiled me. I was a Black woman, low income, and had no high school diploma, living in a subsidized housing, getting disability. They gave them to a distant family member who had no connection with the kids at all. They higher integrate. The children paid the price. The system showed them no love. They don't know no family members. They don't know the family members. These kids right now are angry, mad. They on the streets. They're selling drugs to help their moms and stuff like that to keep from being put in the foster system. These kids are going from foster care to prison pipeline. I fought back with Give Us Back Our Children. I got the press, the support of family members, and elected officials, wrote letters and protested outside of DHS, but we lost because our lawyer didn't fight for me like he should have. Now I'm campaigning with every mother and family caregivers trying to get children back elective self-help. The system has to change. Taking children from their mother or grandmother when they can't pay their water bill, their gas bill, putting them in foster care, giving the foster care moms more money than the biological moms, and helping them pay their water bill and gas bill. Poverty is not neglect, and poverty and disability are not camouflaged. I feel like DHS is they don't show these kids no love. These kids is hating, they angry. They ain't been with their family members. They don't know their sisters, their brothers, their aunts, their uncles. I had them two nieces taken from me back in 2013, and I haven't seen them since. And it's a shame where they don't let these kids visit their family. And I just want to thank you for letting me be on to tell my story, because it's just that they just traumatizing these kids and putting them on medication. Go ahead, Pat.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. And thank you so much, Saranya, for inviting us to join this amazing international seminar. We are really so appreciative that you've brought together so many people who are fighting in many different ways to end the taking of children from their mothers and families. And we're looking forward to seeing the film. I'm a low-income single mother and former welfare recipient, campaigning as part of the global women's strike to get our unwaged caregiving work as mothers and other family caregivers valued and supported with the income we need and deserve. Give Us Back Our Children was formed in 2006 in response to so many mothers fighting to get their children back who contacted our Crossroads Women's Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. As Carolyn mentioned, we work under the principle of collective self-help, strategizing together on cases, supporting each other in court, pressing lawyers to fight for justice, and to address the root causes. The movement to end child poverty, to end child removal due to poverty is growing across the US on the city, state, and national level. In California, a state law known as the Camlogger Bill would prohibit family courts from separating a child from his or her family solely because of poverty. On the national level, Congresswoman Gwen Moore from Wisconsin introduced the Poverty is Not Child Neglect Act, which she hopes she will reintroduce this year, banning federal funds from being used to separate children from their parents solely due to poverty. Here in Philadelphia, a city council special committee on child separations was fought for and won by mothers who had had their children taken away, one of the highest rates of removal in the country. The special committee made a number of recommendations which we strongly support and are pressing to get implemented, including neglect should be removed from the state law defining child abuse and should no longer be subject to Child Protective Services investigations. Any family condition that can be remedied through the provision of concrete help, including but not limited to direct cash assistance, food, housing, assistance, and or childcare, shall not be cause for a Child Protective Services investigation. We would add that concrete helps need to be provided now. Poverty, along with racism, sexism, and other discriminations, is the main driver of child removals, and cash assistance and other concrete help is the main remedy. Over 50% of Black children in the US will experience a child welfare investigation before their 18th birthday, and nearly 10% of Black children will be removed from their parents and placed into foster care, both double the rate of white children. Mothers and other primary caregivers are calling for money in our hands, as others have said, including reinstating and increasing benefits that have proven effective in reducing poverty. And we want to flag up in particular the reintroduction of a bill in the US Congress last week, a historic bill, again by Congresswoman Gwen Moore, which went to DC to support, that says the definition of work must include unwaged mothers, other family caregivers, and higher education students, making them eligible for the earned income tax credit for the first time. To us, this is huge. Oops, there we go. Mothers are already working, yet we are treated like beggars at the gate, and children are treated as if they're undeserving of their mother's protection and nurturing. Unpaid care work contributes 1.5 trillion to the US economy. There are 53 million unpaid family caregivers in the US, and women do 2/3 of the world's work for 5% of the income. We need a society where caring is central and are part of a growing movement worldwide, calling for a guaranteed care income for all caring for people and the land. And we thank you again for this moving and inspiring, all the moving and inspiring testimonies here today.
Thank you so much. That was really terrific. And we'd like to hear more about your work with Give Us Back Our Children and Support Not Separation. We're going to have you all back again soon. Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Pat. We'll now move on to Tracy Norton from the United Kingdom. She belongs to the UK chapter of Support Not Separation, the same network as Pat and Carolyn's. She also belongs to the Disabled Mothers' Rights Campaign, and she will tell us about social services in the United Kingdom.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be speaking to you today here from London, England, on behalf of Support Not Separation and also the Disabled Mothers' Rights Campaign, which is part of WinVisible, Women with Visible and Invisible Disabilities, one of the groups in our coalition. And as you've just heard, we also work closely with Give Us Back Our Children in the US. I'm a mother with an invisible disability, and I have a severely disabled child who was taken from me not because I'd harmed him, but because of disability discrimination. The state wanted to stop paying the support money we were legally entitled to, which I'd fought hard so that I could keep him safe at home. And they also wanted to cover up hospital mistakes by blaming me for them. In care, my son was abused, denied medical care and education. And finally, when I got him home with the help of Support Not Separation, my smiling, funny child had lost his love of life and smile, something I think the movie shows. What we're facing in the UK, as in the US and many other countries, is tens of thousands of children being taken from loving mothers in secret courts, snatched because of poverty, sexism, racism, class, and disability discrimination. Most children are not taken because they have been harmed, but because successive governments have cut funding for the support for families in favour of privatised child removal industry. They want to maintain men's power over women and children. So when mothers report domestic abuse, they take the children from us and put them in care or give them to the violent fathers. Support Not Separation includes organisations of single mothers, women of colour and asylum seekers, refugees, women with disabilities, rape survivors, breastfeeding advocates, kingship carers, psychotherapists, men and former social workers committed to defending mothers and children against unwarranted separation and the devaluing of the mother-child relationship. The Global Women's Strike is part of Support Not Separation, has an international network which includes rural women in India who are organising against the bonded labour and domestic violence and for natural farming. We're sorry not to have seen the film beforehand, but I'm really looking forward to it. It's something that will closely touch my heart. It's a great victory for the movement of mothers everywhere that it is being shown widely in cinemas. It's not often that we see our struggles reflected on the big screen, and we're delighted to be in touch with the women in India who are fighting against the brutality of the child welfare system, just as we are here. Since 2017, we have monthly protests outside the family court in central London and also on Twitter with a Twitter storm to expose what's happening inside the courts. We also have collective monthly self-help meetings at the Crossroads Women's Centre in London, where we're based, and also online, where mothers exchange tactics, drawing on their own experiences and the experiences of all the organisations based at the centre which are working with Support Not Separation. And this pulling together of our experiences and expertise, called collective self-help, has been successful in winning cases and building the mothers' movement against the state removal of child removal. We have a blog and we have an online self-help guide, which we always refer women to and which you can all access. We're now in touch with hundreds of mothers, as well as grannies and other primary carers. And last November, we published our latest research based on the cases we've been involved in fighting. And we will tell you that nearly all of the mothers were single mothers, and disproportionately women of colour, immigrants, disabled, and victims of domestic abuse. Over 4 million children in the UK now live in poverty, and poverty is used by the state, together with domestic violence, to claim that the mother is neglecting the child and the children should be taken away from her. Women don't report domestic abuse for fear the state is going to take away their children and give them to the violent man. There are over 82,000 children in care in England and Wales, and this includes a disproportionate number of children of colour, including those taken because their immigrant parents are denied state funds, and disabled children. Children in the poorest neighbourhoods are at least 10 times more likely to be removed than children in the most affluent ones. And the increasing privatisation of children's services has led to the fostering and adoption becoming a highly profitable industry worth millions, which depends on a continual supply of children. It's great that this point is mentioned in the film, and it's not surprising that the Norwegian government has denied it, a bit like this country. 90% of children are adopted in the UK without the wishes of their parents, of their natural family. We see every day social workers, psychologists, judges, and even our own lawyers dismiss the mother-child bond and the importance of mothers in children's lives. Mothers are the first protectors and are being tortured by the constant threat that their children will be taken, knowing the heartache and the trauma the child faces. Mothers and kinship carers are organising all over the UK and internationally. And recently, this movement we are part of won a pilot project here in the UK where reporters are allowed into 3 courts to report anonymously on these cases. This is a small step, as we want the courts to be open so that they are publicly accountable for the decisions that they make in these closed courts. And as well as opening the courts, we demand that the right of children to their mothers, their first carer and their protector. We value the crucial bond between the mother and child and the right to support, including financial support. We are calling for a care income for the caring and protective work mothers or grandmothers do. We must stop children being taken because of poverty, camouflaged as neglect. And we must stop the decisions based on sexism, racism, class, and disability discrimination. Stop adoptions without the consent of the mother and birth family, and end privatization of children's services. No profiting from the cruel separation of children from their families. Thank you for inviting us to speak here, and we very much hope that we can be in touch to build this international movement of mothers who are children's first protectors.
Thank you, Tracy. That was fantastic. And I hope that everyone who's been participating will continue to stay in touch. And listening to you, I'm so much reminded of the late journalist and thinker, polemicist, novelist, Christopher Booker. He dedicated the last 10 years of his life to writing the stories of families in England whose children were taken away. He fought his editors. He fought his editors for 10 years to get his reports down every Sunday for the British public to read about this. He was the only journalist who showed this dedication and commitment. And I'm very happy that his son is among us here today. Christopher is listening to this. I know that he's listening to this, and he sees that the stellar work that he did, work that I found sitting far away in Delhi, which helped me to understand this system and helped me to understand how to help parents and to reach out to the others, has, it's a legacy and a boon that he's bestowed to all of us. And I know that there are many people in England who are working in this field who feel the same about him. We'll now quickly move on to Heather Kirkwood in the US. Heather is a wonderful, wonderful lawyer who gives all her time to hundreds of families caught up in child protective cases. She has built up a mighty network of defense attorneys, forensics experts, and other specialists all over the US, UK, and Europe. I traced her out after reading an article by her 10 years ago when looking for help in the US, when I was contacted by the first Indian family there with a taken baby. The case was of a pattern that I later saw occurring over and over again. The father is a software engineer, newly arrived with his family to the States. Typically, there are new parents, and the child was taken away when they go to hospital with some injury the child has suffered accidentally. They're immediately accused by the hospital of causing the injury themselves. It's called shaken baby syndrome, a very flawed medical theory that Heather will speak to you about. Heather helps in all these cases for free. She goes out of her way, not just to give legal advice, but to comfort and give hope to these Indian families. She's available at dinner parties, at conferences elsewhere, and even recently on holiday in Vietnam. Heather deserves an award from the government of India for her help to Indian families in the US. And one day, I hope she will get it. Heather, on to you.
Well, thank you. Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, all right. Well, thank you. I'm not sure I'm deserving of that. And I must say that as I listened to the other speakers, I thought, okay, well, first of all, I heard this morning 8 minutes. I usually give hour and a half talks. So I'm very technical. And then I switched over. And then as the speakers spoke, I thought, well, they're covering everything I was going to cover. Now, what am I going to talk about? Now, I think Sirianya is telling me that I should talk about Shaken Baby, which I took entirely out of my presentation between last night and as the other speakers were speaking. So this will be a bit of a blend, and I'm going to try to talk quickly. last night I was thinking, now, why am I at this conference? Because really my cases aren't very much like the family in the movie. Mine are medical cases, highly technical. And when I give talks, I'm usually showing slides, radiology slides and autopsy slides and everything else, all of which I took out of this. So, so I thought, no, this is really about families and the importance of families. I'm going to talk about the families. So that's what I decided to do. And I decided that to do that, I would cut down on a talk that I gave some years ago in 2016. I don't really feel the need as much to talk about families now because some of the families have spoken for themselves and much better than I could do. But that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about myself very briefly. I don't deserve all of the credit that Saranya has given me. But I really was I graduated from Harvard Law School about 100 years ago, as you can see, and became an antitrust attorney, securities fraud, commercial litigation. Those are big, complex cases, lots of investigation, lots of good lawyers on every side. So that was my background. And then I fell into what I call the rabbit hole of shaken baby syndrome, abusive head trauma. Actually, the first case was a sexual assault case. It was in the family. My daughter-in-law's brother had been convicted of raping his 3-year-old daughter. They asked me to look at it. All the appeals have been exhausted. I had to search back into my Canadian high school days to think of the term habeas petition. You're supposed to do a habeas petition if all the appeals have been exhausted. I didn't know what a habeas petition was. I'm not a criminal lawyer, wasn't then, and am not now. So I told the family they wanted me to look at it. They believed he was innocent. And I thought, well, if he's innocent, he should be back with the family. But if he's not innocent, we need to keep the kids away from him. So this was a very practical decision on my part. And I said I would look at it from that perspective, same perspective as I did for the government. You're trying to get the right answer. Well, turned out that the evidence supported innocence. He's now on the exoneration index. I saw him a few months ago, and he was very happily fishing, his new hobby, reunited with all but one of his children. So that was that. I went back to commercial litigation, securities fraud, and then the next case came. That was an Ernie Lopez case. That was sexual assault and shaken baby. So I thought, okay, I can handle the sexual assault. I can look at the photos. I have experts. Wish I would have known Ted Harrigan there, but I didn't. So the sexual assault part was fairly simple, though he was sentenced to 65 years in prison for the sexual assault with death penalty charges pending for shaken baby. So investigated that one. The conviction was overturned. Once again, there was no evidence of sexual assault and no evidence of shaking. Now, he took a plea bargain on that once the conviction was overturned. That's what made me realize, and other people have talked about, how you must admit. You must admit to save your children to get your children back. That's in family court. They want an admission. And I will have to say here that on the sexism front, I have found the men to be rather gallant. They are always throwing themselves forward to save their wives. These are good, long-standing relationships, but they are saying, the mother must have the children back. It's so important for the children. I have to take the fall. And that's in the words of Adrian Thomas, one of the cases which has subsequently been overturned. So full confession, I have to take the fall. Yes, I did that. Yes, I did this. Total nonsense. The baby was septic. Nothing to do with abuse at all, nothing to do with trauma, nothing to do with impact. So that was the first time that I saw someone faced with a decision to take a plea bargain. And I thought, oh my, he's been given a 97% chance of acquittal at a retrial. And he said 3% is too high. He already knew that you can be falsely convicted. He had been falsely convicted, but he also saw the impact on his family, that after the conviction was overturned, he was living with his parents. One child had moved in with them entirely, and 2 others he had reestablished relationships. He said, I can't do that to my family. I can't put them through the trial. I can't put them through the uncertainty, and I can't take a 3% chance of disrupting their lives again. I can't do that. That was totally understandable. everybody knows he's innocent. The whole town knew he was innocent. So I also saw him a few months ago, and he has a new girlfriend. He has good relationships with his parents, with his children, and now with a grandchild, maybe two. And that's so it makes sense to make admissions often, and that's what attorneys advise. I give them the pros and cons. I can't make that decision for them. I'm going to try to share my screen because this morning I decided that, or last night I decided that I was, disabled screen sharing. Can you share it? Can that be allowed? Saranya, help. No? Let's see. No? And I have part of a PowerPoint presentation that I was going to share that will give you some idea. I'll give you background now, though. In the cases that I have looked at, and I maybe have 15, 16, 17 cases listed, in each of these cases, the parents were accused and sometimes convicted of harming their children, either assaulting them or murdering them. In each of these cases, a proper investigation of the type that I did in security fraud and government cases showed that there was another cause. Let's see, use the screen share if you want. Now, okay, let me see if I can do that. Share. Let's see if I can move this up. Yeah, I left some technical in. All right, so this was a talk that I gave in 2016 to the Florida Association of Death Penalty Attorneys. And the difference in these cases from many other cases is that generally speaking, you have a murder and the question is who did it, or a child died and they say it's a murder and the question is who did it. But these cases are different because in these cases, they're not just making a murderer. This was a popular Netflix type show of how they created evidence that was false or misleading to convict. Well, it wasn't a parent in that case, but of a murder. But what they do here is that they create the crime, they create the murder. So very, very different. These were some of the people who were accused of murder, which were my initial cases, Christian Asplin, Tavarius Radford. But what's most important here, all kinds of people, all kinds of families. But in every single case, there was either a natural medical cause or an accidental injury. Adrian Thomas on sepsis, Roman and Lynette Finnegan, the child had a heart condition, a prescription error, and the skull fracture was created at autopsy, as a forensic pathologist eventually admitted. Rishi Ramguli, a Cornell graduate, he had nothing to do with the original injuries. Connie Reichen, virtually a saint, most wonderful daycare person in the world. Again, that was a fall some days earlier. That's Ernie, whom I just spoke about. The baby died of pneumonia and a coagulopathy. It had been a sick baby from birth. The two Boston nanny cases, I'm not going to go through those, but the medical evidence is really quite clear in these cases that these are not murders. They aren't even assaults. Some of them are shortfalls, most are natural. So that's where I'm coming from. When I looked at the first case about 10 years ago, I think it's longer than that now, maybe that should be 20. My son looked at it. He was at Oxford at the time. I asked him to give me the research basis for shaken baby syndrome. He came back after 3 months and he said, there is no research basis for shaken baby syndrome. And I thought, oh my gosh, $100,000 in an Oxford education, you can't find the research basis for shaken baby syndrome. That has since been confirmed by a 2016 report out of the basically Karolinska Institute, sponsored by the Swedish government, which found no reliable evidentiary basis for shaken baby syndrome. So we know that now. I was very struck by one panelist who said that they know that there's a lot of information. They know it's wrong, but they continue to repeat it. That moves to me into the fraud area. I did securities fraud. If this was a securities case, this would be fraud. You'd go to prison for saying it, but it's still happening. Yet doctors are continuing to testify that they can diagnose based on various internal distinctions, hundreds of thousands of cases each year. So I think I'm probably already used up much of my time. So I'm just going to introduce the families. I'm going to do two. I'm going to do this algorithm. This is the algorithm that is taught in medical schools and applied routinely by doctors. You can see if they have a skull fracture and oh, sorry, I went back. How do I go back in? It's used always. And when you look at the injury type, these are mostly internal injuries. And when you look at some of them, like intradural hemorrhage or subdural subarachnoid, we now know that 40% of babies have that, asymptomatic newborn babies. But when you look at the lines, there is no place on here that leads you to innocence. You can be presumptive for inflicted injury or suspicious for inflicted injury. That's as far as you get. That algorithm never gives you no injury or no inflicted injury. Same on bones. Forces are wrong. We know this. And I'm just going to, this is the type of work I do, which I often do in my presentations. I go through the various slides and so on to show what you have to do. Talk about overworked attorneys. These are mostly public defenders, assigned counsel. They don't have time to do this. They don't have time to learn the slides, have them reviewed. They don't have time. So lots of natural cases, lots of shortfall cases, and I'm going to take you all the way down here. Here's something that has changed. When I first did this, it was mostly with dead babies, accusations of murder, people in prison for life. We still have some on death row. What I'm seeing now are well babies, perfectly well babies, babies who develop normally. That was true in the cases involving Indians that Saranya was discussing. The only difference with those cases is that there are slightly more previous injuries from falls in India. India seems to have harder surfaces on some of the floors, stone floors. And so they come with a pre-existing skull fracture, a pre-existing subdural. They have another small rebleed, again from a fall, and off you go down the abuse end. So that's the only difference I've noted. Mostly sick babies, household accidents, over and over. So here are the people. Once you go through the evidence, what did the child actually die of? And these aren't all death cases. Most of these ones happen to be because they were early cases. But you see there's a warfarin overdose, there's childhood stroke, there's pneumonia, there's birth trauma, there's even pancreatitis abdominal injury. It's a whole array of the things from which people die. And so I just wanted to introduce a couple of the families. These are the Asplins, shortfall with misintubation and thrombosis. That's the older child who did not die. That's the one who did die, the baby. They have since had 3 children. They didn't intend to have 3 children. They were IVF, turned out to be triplets. They were quite shocked. So there are wonderful, wonderful pictures of them with all 4 children now. The Finnegans, this was a 14-year-old who died. They said they had killed her. There was a prescription error that I found in approximately within a day of looking at the case. Triple dose of warfarin, for those of you who know what warfarin is. She'd had open heart surgery 3 times, and there was a skull fracture, and it was very clearly created an autopsy because the pre-autopsy photos didn't have a skull fracture. So we knew that. So this is a case where they were reunited. Tremendous harm to the family, absolutely tremendous harm. PTSD, talk about PTSD. These people have PTSD far beyond that, which is often found after seeing bombs explode in Afghanistan. And I'm not making light of that. I'm just giving some comparative. Felix's wonderful, wonderful story. These were adopted children who the mother was a prostitute. They adopted the first child. Then she said the second child was available. They adopted that child. They were accused. They're both medical professionals. She was an ICU nurse, and he was a physician's assistant. Wonderful careers. Finally got that dismissed in family court. Took forever. But didn't take that long, relatively speaking, maybe a year or 2. And I got a Christmas card. They had 6 children in. They'd adopted 4 more children after that. Herrera's vitamin D rickets. Swedish report should have changed the world, but it didn't. It found that there was no reliable basis for shaken baby syndrome. One would think that would stop everything. I do think the cases in Sweden have gone down. Norway is on the fringe. Norway is right on the cusp. It's headed that way. It's not there yet. These were other just miscellaneous cases that I've had since in more recent years. Childhood stroke, adopted children with chronic disease, Liebig, abdominal injury infection preceding the period. It was testified there were 20 whip marks. There were no whip marks. He was in DIC and lying on IV tubes. Recently granted a certificate of innocence. Bradford, this was a nurse. Devilbot, there was a lack of brain development. Now, I don't find that in a lot of doctors here, and that a lot of doctors being accused, they're just the most likely to find somebody, I think. So that's where I find the real disparity. I don't find as much of an ethnicity difference. If they find these findings, they claim abuse, and it doesn't matter who you are. I've got white doctors, I've got people on welfare, I've got people who had criminal records, had come out of prison, and it's all the same. Now, when I do the case, Liebig was one where he had a prison, well, Immel had a prison record. Liebig didn't have, but he had a long history of drug use, including on that day. It just didn't happen under his case. So everybody. The difference, I think, is that people with more money can pay for better legal defenses, but it doesn't always get them anywhere, because you can get a very expensive lawyer who isn't willing to look at the autopsy slides and the autopsy photos, or isn't able to. So it doesn't always get you there. So I'm kind of mixed on that as to how much of a role ethnicity plays. It's kind of an equal opportunity accusations. We've had pretty much everybody. So I'm saying, what do these cases have in common? All of them. What they have in common, including Mrs. Chatterjee, is that parents or caretakers were, typo there, were falsely accused of abuse, and the children were taken based on false, inaccurate, even fraudulent claims. In some cases, they were in prison. At least 2 are still on death row. So this is dead serious. The harm to the children, the taking of the children, I'm seeing that increasingly in well children. Perfectly, absolutely well children. They used to have to be dead. They don't have to be dead anymore. They can be perfectly well taken in for a routine medical issue and find themselves accused. So that's takeaways. It can happen to anyone. The claims are articles of faith rather than precepts of science. That's from a well-known federal court case in which I was involved. Often more accurate to say the claims are imaginary. They result in the worldwide destruction of families, and it's not just Norway. So also the US, Canada, Australia, Germany, France, the UK, even Japan. So that's where we are. Great progress made. Sometimes we slide backwards. Extremely interesting from a medical perspective. And I'm going to turn this over to Ted Harriton, for whom I had searched for years because I have a death penalty case that I want him to look at. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heather. And I hope we will see you in India before too long.
Okay.
We're down to our last 2 speakers. Thank you for being such a patient audience, but it was important to have this conversation across the globe for people to take it in. Our next speaker is Dr. Ted Harriton, a gynecologist from the US with decades of experience as a medical defense expert in cases where parents are accused of sexual abuse when they take their injured children to hospital. Ted, the floor is yours.
I was saying that for Heather, we have mutual friends in that world of the shaken baby. That's how Saranga got to me, is through that people. Ed Wiley and Holman, Dr. Tees, these are all people I know. Anyway, the world, I see this world totally differently. I deal with the Child Protective Services, and we see the Child Protective Services, at least in the United States, as overworked, underpaid, and they want the simplest answer possible. So a great deal of what I've done is deal with the medical aspects of a German national couple in the United States. Their child had gonorrhea. They're going to take the baby away from them. The pediatrician says gonorrhea is always from sexual things. Well, it's not. They got to me, we get the medical literature saying gonorrhea can be from sexual, but also can be just from solutions. That's the way gonorrhea works. We got him off. A 13-year-old girl went on a bicycle, was in the hospital having surgery for a fractured ankle. The nurses noted her perineum was red, the bottom was red. Why they were looking at the bottom, I don't know, but they noticed that and called CPS. CPS came up and said, aha, it's a stay-home father. He must have done something to her. They took the kid away. Well, when you investigate a little bit, the kid had been on a 27-mile bicycle ride, a 13-year-old girl, the day of this redness. which is an obvious answer. It was a simple thing. I practiced. I did the standard training for OBGYN. I'm board certified. I'm an American college, all those good things. I stopped looking at being a lawyer in Southern California. Called me and said, would I do a case, a sexual abuse case? And I said, no, I don't do that. He said, well, he said, I want you to do that. I said, well, why did you call me? He said, well, two lawyers in my community know you from malpractice and say you're fair and you're right. And when you get a compliment like that, you've got to do something. So I said, I'd look at the case. And it turned out, listening to the police report, I didn't know police could lie to the complaining witness, besides lying. They lied to anybody else, but it's okay. The girl said was a 17-year-old challenged girl who came home to her challenged mother, to her not challenged mother. What do you call it? She's living in a not in a home, in a foster home, and had some bleeding. The mother called the police. They arrested the kid. Well, long story short, it turned out it was a challenged mother, challenged girl having intercourse with a challenged boy and doing it badly. And I'm like, gee, this is kind of neat. I was able to contribute something of interest. And I got started doing these cases. And once you claim to be an expert, you got to become an expert. So you got to join all the different things that Northern Society of Pediatric Adolescent Gynecology, American Professional Society of Abuse of Children, etc. And since I got involved, I've done 100 trials. I've been retained in 30 American states. I've been retained in New Zealand, Sweden twice, Canada several times. I've done testified in trials in Canada. I've got a case going in Germany now. So I've really done a fair amount of work in the field. And the Child Protective Services, which is subject to today's conference, is something I am involved in. And our view of them as their work, etc. But we have to deal with them, and therefore you have to. And that's my only real point, is that they're going to give you the simplest possible answer for them, the one that makes this solves the problem, and they take the kid away or not. That's not my issue. I can't deal with that. I only can deal with dealing with the issue. Is the kid injured? Is it not injured? And how is it injured? And that's really my task. And that's it's a simple task. It's very straightforward. It's not always that simple to do, but the concept is. And that's what I've done. And the one example like that was from Atlanta, a affluent, older woman, married couple, sent Christmas card baskets out every year as a gift and left her card in it. A year later, 6 months later, she gets a call from a hospital. One of the recipients has dropped her 4.5-year-old daughter off and given it to her, given the child to her. Her kids are already grown, but she says, I'll deal with this, and gets the state to say this kid is disturbed and we'll help you with it. Shortly thereafter, the child has a severe bleed. The child is a self-injurer. That's one of the major problems the child has. And goes to the hospital, has to have 2 surgeries. And they finally decide that the bleeding had to be because the mother did it. The reason the mother did it, in Child Protective Services, our experience is, if something bad happens, dad did it. If the only way mother did it is if dad's out of town. Now, in this case, dad was out of town, so therefore mother did it. Anyway, I got involved and was able to show in a hearing that the injury was much more likely caused by the child, who admitted sticking her finger in the tutu, she called it, and that the mother really hadn't done anything other than take care of the kid. We convinced the hearing, and they gave the mother back the child. Now, here's not her child, she's raising it, and that was the result. The good part of all this was that 3 months later, the lawyer called me from Atlanta, a lovely lady, and said, I just wanted to come and tell you that it's been 3 months now. The mother demanded the therapy promised by the state, And they have counseling every single day of the week, every day of the month. And the child has done well, and the kids can be okay. That made me feel good. So the issue is you've got to deal with child protective services, understand who they are, and understand what their needs are. Their needs are to solve the case as quickly as possible with any answer they can give. But you've got to look for a medical reason, or if there's a medical reason for the injury, it isn't necessarily caused by the father. It can be caused by other things. That's really the major things I wanted to talk about. Is there any questions about that answer there?
Thanks, Ted. Sorry, we don't have the time for questions, but I'm sure that we're all going to gather again. I think that this should become at least an annual, if not a biannual gathering of all of us. And you all have your emails, and I hope you'll be in touch, beyond this seminar as well. I'm just going to thank everyone for their patience. I'm going to thank all the participants. It's been a very, very insightful and wide-ranging and sober discussion, and I'm very grateful that you took the time out to speak here for an Indian audience. And I'm just going to end by running the tape that we had begun to run, which was of the chief of the Child Welfare Committee that finally awarded Sagarika her babies when she returned to India. And after that, we'll all go out for a really good dinner. You deserve it. Thank you. Thank you to all my friends who joined on the live stream online. I'm very interested to have your comments and hear from you, and let's be in touch.
Good evening, everyone present here. In this evening, we assembled here to take part in a seminar titled Man, Woman, Child and the State, Lessons from the True Story Behind Mrs. Chatterjee versus Norway. The recently released film based on Sagarika Chakraborty's autobiography, The Journey of a Mother, published last year. First of all, I express thanks to Surana Yar, a renowned lawyer and a dedicated social activist of Delhi, who organized this seminar and invited me in this platform. So today evening I am here to share my unique experience as member of the Child Welfare Committee, Bardwan District, West Bengal, in dealing with the case of Sagarika and ultimate disposal of the case. The story in short is that Sagarika Chakraborty, a Bengali girl of Kolkata, moved to Norway in marital concern. At that time, she and her parents were quite ignorant about the environment, society, ideology, culture, lifestyle of Norway, where the girl would have to settle very near future. Within a few years, she became mother of two kids, a son Ovigyan and a daughter Aishwarya. In 2011, the Norwegian Child Welfare Services Authority forcefully took the custody of the children from the parent, declaring them incompetent parent. Very soon they further declared Sagarika mentally unwell and hence was incapable to take proper care of her kids. As mother of two infants, one was then sucking baby of 4 months, Sagarika could not accept such forceful separation of her family, and her struggle against the state system of Norway began. She protested vehemently against such inhuman confiscation of her babies. Due to her tireless fighting, the family matter soon turned into a matter of the country. The case became highly publicized and the government of India had to intervene. After many negotiations between governments of two states, Norway government agreed to release the babies under the custody of their paternal uncle, a 27 years bachelor. To get back the children in the soil of her own country, Sagarika at that time found no way but to sign the agreement. The second phase of struggle began in India against the foreign decision of placing her babies under foster care of her brother-in-law. Very soon she appealed to the authorities of India to have the sole custody of her children. Department of Foreign Affairs, Government of India forwarded the case to the Child Welfare Committee, District of Bardwan, West Bengal, as the children stayed in their paternal uncle's address in Bardwan. From that very moment, the Child Welfare Committee of the District of Bardwan, West Bengal, of which I was then one of the members, took the case as per Juvenile Justices Act 2000, Section 31 of which says that CWC is the final authority to dispose the cases of care, protection, treatment, development and rehabilitation of children. Further, sole custody of mother over children below 7 years is permissible in Indian law. The Child Welfare Committee Bardwan dealt with the case very carefully and sympathetically. The committee assured Sagorika and her parent that CWC is duty bound to properly place the children under the fit person. After various medical examination, series of sittings with psychologists and counselors, the Child Welfare Committee declared Sagorika physically and mentally fit to take care of her children, and ultimately within 6 months of the receipt of the case, the Child Welfare Committee, exercising its power and jurisdiction, passed order in favor of Sagorika's appeal to get back her children, discharge the babies from the inhuman foster care agreement and place them under custody of mother. Sagorika's struggle ended on January 2013. But the struggle in her own country was not so easy as I narrated. There were so many ups and downs in the journey, but as the CWC Bardwan district was then determined to reunite the mother and children by exercising its powers given in the Juvenile Justice Act 2000, it overcame all obstacles, especially came from the foster carer House of Kulti, Bardwan. Child Welfare Committee ultimately declared motherhood winner. Children were returned to their mother's lap. The story ended here. Sagorika Chakraborty came victorious in her own struggle as well as in conveying a very important message to our society. It is known fact that many of the younger generation of the third world countries are aspiring to be NRI, target a job in European states, USA, Canada or elsewhere and settle down in these so-called first world countries, attracted by lucrative package, comfort and happiness. At the time they absolutely forget or do not care about the geographical, social structure and cultural differences between the two worlds. Ultimately, in that unknown soil, they are compelled to spend life as second-class or third-class citizens, and the life is not so smooth as they imagined. The story of Mrs. Chatterjee versus Norway would be a valuable lesson for those aspiring people. The producer, director, story writer of this film all deserve appreciation for upholding the story to all in form of a movie with renowned actors. Lastly, I request all to watch the movie and take part in the movement against such inhuman and mechanical childcare system of the so-called first world. Congratulations to Sagorika. Thanks all.